Hey, thanks everyone for being here. Let me just wait a couple seconds, see if anyone else joins. I promise I'll start soon. Just getting my sources together here real quick. So while we're waiting, it'll just be a quick second here, but I just want to say at the onset of this that bear with me a little. I know I get a little excited and I jump around a little, but it's just, this show's just me. And I literally just got finished watching the same live testimony as you did. So this is my off the cuff reaction to that. I kept notes and made tweets as things were going on. So I'll be going back to reference them because it's very difficult to go through something like this that's like 4 hours long and keep your thoughts consistent on everything that you had a problem with going through the whole thing. So at some point in the future, I might decide to do a video where I literally go step by step through some of these impeachment hearings and give my exact thoughts on everything that's being said. So that is something that could happen. But just give me a few seconds here and then we'll get started. Okay, just about ready. So I just want to apologize. I wrote that this would start at 2, but I had no idea when the actual testimony would end. So let's get started. So here are my overall feelings on what went on today. I did a couple periscopes, so I'll just kind of, as quickly as possible, rehash what's going on with them and kind of my general overview of what went on here. So generally, I don't understand how this benefited the Democrats whatsoever. There's two things that they could possibly be doing, and I'll try to be as polite as possible in playing devil's advocate to make the case for them. The first is what Schiff's closing statements were, where they're trying to set up that there was this kind of long-standing effort to get Rudy Giuliani and Sondland in charge of kind of the ambassadorship of the Ukraine, and they were going to do some nefarious stuff to take down Joe Biden. And so this was step one of that. But that's not really going to make sense because ultimately they appointed Ambassador Taylor, who's also the star witness of the Democrats. And there would have been way better ways to go about doing something like this than to publicly be announcing everything that you're doing. Remember, Yovanovitch herself admits, yes, of course the president could have fired me for any reason. I just don't understand what the smear campaign was about. Well, could it be possible the smear campaign was, as they were learning more and more about Yovanovitch, they didn't want her there, and that's why they were talking about it? If they really just wanted to bury her and put in some people, they'd have done it kind of under the cloak. They wouldn't have been announcing how bad Yovanovitch was. They would have just said, okay, thank you for your service. We're going to move you here. We'd like to put someone else in charge. But instead, they did all this stuff publicly, just like Trump's phone call with Zelensky was done with dozens of people that he didn't even know in the room. And so with transcribers there, if this was some effort to be shady and do something illegal, why would they do it in the open like all of this? And the other reason that the Democrats wanted Yovanovitch to testify, well, I guess there's three. The second reason is they want her to come off like Christy Blasey Ford as a sympathetic woman or something like that. I have no time of day for that type of crap. I think that the Republicans make a mistake of not going after Yovanovitch as hard as they should have, just like they made that mistake with Christine Blasey Ford. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we should attack anyone who's alleging sexual abuse or something like that, but it seemed clear that there were plenty of things wrong with Blasey Ford's testimony, and if you just default to, oh, we're going to treat you with kids' gloves, then you're always going to lose that battle. And that's something I'm going to talk about, my problem with Republicans. They're too defensive when it comes to all this. They need to be the aggressors more often. But the third reason, and the most important reason that the Democrats brought Yovanovitch to testify, is they are desperately trying to stop any investigation of their corruption. That's what this whole impeachment hearing's about in the first place. Now, they know there's a better than not chance that the Senate's never going to remove Trump. And they know that this probably won't get many people to change their mind as it comes to who's going to vote for Trump in the 2020 election. Most of those that think he should be impeached were already going to vote against Trump. Most of those who think this is a sham were already going to vote for Trump. So what's it really about? They're setting up the narrative. One of the things, if you watch my channel, that you see constantly is that the Democrats control all of our cultural institutions of power that shape the public narrative. So that would be the mainstream media. That would be academia. That would be Silicon Valley, right? All of those places, the entertainment industry. And so they control all of that, and that's what the Republicans end up responding to. The Republicans have lost that culture battle, and so the Republicans are constantly in a position of responding. The only area that Republicans are ahead is in meme warfare, which Republicans are light years ahead, which is why I have hope that the younger generations are starting to see through this social justice warrior crap that we see coming up on the left and their corruption. But I digress from that. And so they know, because they control the narrative, that they'll be able to spin this as, oh, see, now when Trump's investigating corruption that went into the 2016 election that helped the Democrats, or he's investigating corruption that Joe Biden or his son might have been involved in, that itself is illegal. That itself needs to be tarnished. I've already seen Democrats saying, well, we know that the IG report's supposed to be coming out soon. And the Democrat response is, oh, yeah, to distract from impeachment. Are you kidding? We've known that this report's been coming out for months now. We knew that it was coming out around this time. And then the Democrats started their impeachment effort. So the idea that the IG report's a distraction from impeachment, it's reality, as oftentimes is the case with these Democrats. They're actually accusing the other side of exactly what they're doing. They know there's a better than not chance that the IG, and particularly the Durham report, is going to be focused on the intel agencies and the previous administration and corruption that could have happened therein. And so there might be a chance, and I hope there is, that we actually are looking at what happened in the Ukraine and Ukraine's interference to benefit the Democrats in the 2016 election. So they need to get on top of that. Because they spent 3 years saying, oh, foreign election interference is the most serious thing ever. No stone unturned. We have to raid lawyers' offices in the middle of the night with with people with guns drawn. We have to charge people for decades-old crimes. We have to charge trolls that talked about things. All of it in the name of foreign election interference. Some people said it was an act of war. You even hear all these witnesses. Every one of them is conditioned to say the same thing. We know the real interference occurred from Russia. So they all think foreign interference is a big deal. Right up until the point where it's foreign interference that benefits the Democrats. Then all of a sudden they're like, no, it's no big deal at all. I didn't think that interference was important. Check out my video I did on Fiona Hill's closed-door testimony. She says in that testimony, when they ask her specifically, what do you think about the Ukrainians releasing this black ledger and announcing that they're doing it because they hate Trump's policies and want Hillary Clinton to win? And she responds, hey, my family didn't vote for those reasons. All people really are concerned about is health care and education. And then 30 seconds later, she's back to talking about, and Russian interference is the biggest deal ever. Isn't it coincidental that every single time it comes to the Democrats committing some crime, like lying to Congress, or failing to register as a foreign lobbyist, or lying to the FBI, or getting dirt on Trump from foreign agents, every single time the excuse is always, well, that's not that bad. But anytime someone connected to the Trump orbit does any of that, it's no stone unturned, never-ending investigations. Every single time. And so that's what this is about. Now, what this wasn't about was Yovanovitch she admits, before Lutsenko was even sworn in, she was out of her position. She wasn't there when things were going on, such as Joe Biden offering his extortion, bribery, quid pro quo to force the prosecutor looking into his son's company to be fired by extorting the Ukraine with $1 billion of your tax dollars. She wasn't there for that. She wasn't there for Lutsenko releasing the black ledger. She wasn't there for any of Trump's phone calls or any of Trump's dealings with Zelensky. Now, what is it? We keep asking, what exactly are you impeaching Trump for? They can't give you a straight answer. It seemed like from the first public hearing that the reason they're trying to impeach Trump is some kind of bribery charge. He supposedly bribed his phone call, and his dealings with Zelensky and Zelensky's people was basically saying, hey, we're not going to, it's a quid pro quo. We're not going to, unless you investigate Burisma and Biden and 2016 election interference, we're not going to give you these money and this military aid. That seemed to be what they were going to impeach him about. She literally has nothing to say about any of that. Her entire testimony is, Trump's a big meanie that fired me, and yeah, he had the right to fire me, but he didn't have to say mean words while he did it. I mean, that's insane. And then you have people like Chris Wallace and Brett Baird from Fox News, right? Fox, pro-Trump. Oh, they're sycophants. State media for Trump. They're saying, oh, our testimony is very powerful. Testimony as to what? Trump's a mean guy and fired an ambassador that he had the right to? That's not relevant to the impeachment charges that the Democrats are bringing at all. It's just designed to appeal to people's emotions and have them say, oh, Trump's a bad guy, which further proves this whole investigation isn't about actual high crimes and misdemeanors. It's about using their public narrative to try to smear Trump. That's all it's about. And so Nunes is right to say the testimony of her is completely worthless, why she's there. Now, one of the things said at the end that I think are worth bringing up are, how did this whole thing start? Schiff says in his closing statements, he says, thank God for the whistleblower who started this whole thing, and thank God for you who are the first person to come forward after the whistleblower. So what's that mean? Well, we know the whistleblower was connected to Schiff's campaign. We know that his lawyer talked about a coup and the need to have a rebellion against Trump back in 2016. We know that the IG said that they'd worked in tangent with one of Trump's political rivals. It looks like it was Biden. We know that they worked with Brennan, and it's Eric Chermella is who it is. We know that they themselves were involved with setting up meetings with Ukraine and Joe Biden's extortion attempt against them. Now we know that first person that came forward was this woman, Yovanovitch, who's an angry, fired employee that thinks she was terminated for unjust reasons. Well, I got news for you. 95% of people that are fired from any job think the people that fired them suck. And they think it was unfair that they got fired. That's the nature of having your employment terminated. So what's the relevance of this? So now we know the two people that started this whole thing, the first two people, were people embittered that disliked Trump for personal reasons. Okay. Nothing she said remotely shows anything illegal. She admitted it. She was asked, do you have any evidence that Trump did something illegal? No. Do you have any evidence that he had like some kind of quid pro quo? No. Do you have any direct knowledge of the phone calls with Zelensky? No. No evidence of crimes. Now, she did something that you saw Kent and Taylor, the first two witnesses from Wednesday, something you saw them do. They're very clever. When they're asked questions about like, well, can you see how Trump would have been upset with what was going on in the Ukraine? They default back to, how would I know what's in Trump's head? I don't know what he was thinking. I never talked to the guy. But then, once they get into their own testimony, they're talking to the Democrats, they say, oh, I know that this was a big conspiracy. Trump and his people were out to get me. I see no other reason that they wanted to do this all for their own political gain. But wait a minute, you just admitted that you don't know what's in his mind. So conveniently, when it benefits the Democrats, you pretend to assume you know what's in his mind. But when we have legitimate concerns of like, couldn't Trump legitimately been concerned about Burisma? Couldn't Trump been legitimately concerned that all of these Ukrainian politicians and officials were attacking out against him? Oh, I don't know what's in his mind when it comes to that. And that's the crux of the problem of what we see going on with the media, with these Democrats, with academia, with the entertainment industry, everyone that's anti-Trump. I keep saying this over and over again. Wednesday's witnesses, what were they trying to get? They're trying to get proof that basically Trump issued a quid pro quo, or now they're calling it extortion or bribery. But the idea is they're trying to get to the threshold that Trump demanded a favor before he would release aid. That's where they're trying to get, right? That's what the Wednesday's testimony is about. Today's didn't even speak to that. It was that worthless. It didn't even speak to that. But that's where the Democrats are trying to get, right? That's where we're already at with Joe Biden and Obama. Because Biden admitted it. Biden admitted to a quid pro quo. Biden admitted to bribery or extortion, whatever you want to call it. He said, you have 6 hours to fire this prosecutor or you ain't getting the $1 billion. They said, well, you're not the president. He said, call Obama. He'll tell you. And wouldn't you know, they fired the son of a bitch. Those are his words. That's his admission. So everything that they're trying to prove is just to get us to the level where Biden is. Now, what all these Democrats are doing, and so many, even Republicans and like never Trump Republicans or never Trumpers in hiding, like Ben Shapiro or Chris Wallace and all these people, I said this from day one. You go back and look at my first post on this back in, when was it? September? Late September, October, when this first came out. I was talking specifically about Ben Shapiro. But this is what I said. Here's the problem. Shapiro says, well, if Trump issued a quid pro quo, that's impeachable. Now, Biden's quid pro quo, that was for legitimate reasons. But how do we know that? The mere fact that the Democrats and these never-Trumpers say that Biden's quid pro quo was okay proves that a quid pro quo is not the threshold for illegality or not the threshold for impeachment. There has to be something more than that. And you heard the Democrats say this constantly today, right? Because the Republicans keep saying, doesn't Trump have a right to fire whatever ambassador he wants? Yes, he has that right. And then the Democrats, remember, I forget the specific representative, but he said something like this. Look, you have a right to ask for help with investigators in the Ukraine, right? And she's like, yeah. He's like, but you don't have the right to do that for a bribe, for $1 million. Right. That's what she says. Yes, correct. So they're making the argument, it's not the action that Trump took that's wrong. The quid pro quo, it's not that. It's the motivation that would make it wrong. Another example he gets, the police officer has the right to pull people over, but he doesn't have the right to pull his ex-wife over because he's angry at her. In other words, it's the motivation, the intent that makes it a problem. Now, why, oh why would Ben Shapiro and all these Democrats and the rest of the never-Trumpers, those publicly never-Trump or in hiding, why would they say, oh, well, we'll start from the position that Biden's quid pro quo was okay. But if Trump issued a quid pro quo, then it's impeachable. It's because this is constantly what's done with Trump. They assume Trump's motivations must be only for personal gain. And they assume Biden's motivations must be totally altruistic and they were to try to end corruption. And that is ridiculous. Not one witness has testified to even speaking to Trump yet. Even those that personally spoke to Trump, how are they going to prove that Trump's public words, that he wanted to investigate corruption? Taylor said that over and over again. If you watch Taylor's testimony, he never says, I overheard people say he wanted an investigation into Biden. He says the investigations into Burisma and into 2016 election interference. Now, it is entirely plausible that Trump wanted those investigations because he wanted to end corruption. But they automatically assume, oh no, because Biden was involved, then it must be for political reasons. Yet with Biden, they do the exact opposite. Biden's son was involved. Oh, that had nothing to do with it. Was there an investigation into Biden that I'm unaware of? Because I don't think there's been one. I haven't seen that. So how in the world, if there's not been an investigation, are all of these Democrats and all of these witnesses and all of these never-Trump Republicans, how do they know that Biden had pure motivations? What's the defense they've given? Well, the EU and the IMF and the Atlantic Council all said that Biden was right to want that prosecutor fired. Okay, but that's irrelevant. Even if Shokin was guilty or he was corrupt, right? That doesn't mean personal motivations couldn't have been Biden's reasoning. So on one hand, the question is, the threshold is there a reason to investigate Biden? If there's a reason to investigate Biden, there is literally no case to impeach Trump. It doesn't matter if he used a quid pro quo, which there's still no proof of. But even if you could prove there's a quid pro quo, if there's a reason to investigate Biden, then there's no case to impeach Trump. That's where the Republicans go wrong. They're constantly playing defense. Well, what about the whistleblower? What about these transcripts? What about this? What about that? They should be making the case more clearly. Yes, they're talking about Hunter Biden, but they should be making the case and focusing on Joe Biden used $1 billion of your tax dollars to fire a prosecutor looking into his son's company. Period. That deserves an investigation. If Trump did it, the American people would demand an investigation. The Democrats would be foaming at the mouth if Trump did that. But the Republicans aren't strong on this. That's the case. That's the argument to be made. And then there's tons of proof that speak further towards motivation. Now, I'm here to tell you right now, I'm partisan. I'm Republican. I'm a Trump supporter. But I've said from day one, if Trump committed crimes, he should be held accountable. I won't leave my partisanship destroy my integrity. I'm open to hearing arguments, right? So as someone who's trying to see past their bias, I'm here to tell you right now, and this might be shocking to a lot of Trump supporters, I can't prove that Biden's motivation was purely personal in wanting the prosecutor looking into his son's company to be fired. I can't prove it. But here's the thing. I could suspect it, which I do, and I could give evidence that that's probably the case, but I can't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. But I don't have to prove it, and neither does Trump. All we have to prove is there's reasoning for an investigation. That's it. I, nor Trump, nor anyone in our intelligence agencies or investigative agencies has proof that Biden did this for personal reasons. You want to know why? Because they haven't investigated it. Now, we just had a 3-year investigation into Trump and people connected to Trump, whether or not they illegally conspired with Russians to steal the 2016 election. It was based on things like Papadopoulos and Mifsud telling him things, which we're going to find out Mifsud was a Western intelligence asset, but that's for another video. Or the dossier that was unverified. And it turns out, after a 3-year investigation, nope, definitively, we now know no Americans or anyone connected to Trump, including Trump himself, illegally conspired with Russia to influence the election in any way. Period. Despite that, the Democrats' excuse is, well, it warranted an investigation. The allegation was so serious we had to investigate. But somehow, when it comes to Joe Biden, nope. No reason for an investigation. In fact, to even suggest an investigation is a conspiracy, and it's illegal for Trump to have done so. Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of things. We know, for example, that Biden was giving grants and aid to the gas industry at the Ukraine, that at the same time his son was getting $3.5 million from Burisma. We know that Biden and Obama knew this was going on. We know that Biden and Obama said that Burisma and its owner, Zilchevsky, were corrupt. Now, again, people are getting tired of hearing this, but I've never heard anyone else say this. So if you're new to the channel, I'll just give my spiel on this right now. 1, anytime, I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Constitutional, Green Party, Independent, anytime an executive authority, executive branch official, uses large sums of taxpayer money to force a country to fire a prosecutor looking into their family's business, there ought to be an investigation. Period. I don't care what the EU says. I don't care what the IMF says. I don't care what the Atlantic Council, all those groups, by the way, with connections to George Soros. I don't care what any of them say at all. Don't care. I don't care what Anderson Cooper says, or what Rachel Maddow says, or Rush Limbaugh, or Sean Hannity, or Rudy Giuliani. Anyone. I don't care. Oh, but the guy was really corrupt. I don't care. I don't care if the executive branch member that did that makes the argument that we heard, which people said I was exaggerating. This was literally the argument that the counsel for the Democrats made again today that I've been saying for a month, which is, oh, Biden's defense is actually, by getting rid of the prosecutor, his son's company stood to be investigated in a more harsh way. Now, if you believe that, I got a bridge to sell you. A politician, a vice president's like, hey, my problem is my son's not being investigated hard enough. I'm going to withhold $1 billion taxes until they investigate my son harder. If that's the case, why is Biden so anti-investigation into himself and his son now? It makes no sense. Whatever the defense is, you withhold taxpayer dollars to demand a prosecutor looking into your family be fired, that warrants an investigation. Because, and everyone admits, Yovanovitch admitted today, the perception of a conflict of interest was really bad, or conflict of interest was really bad with Hunter Biden being there. Every witness has admitted that. All the media places admit that. Yes, the appearance was there was a conflict of interest. The reason that an appearance of a conflict of interest is sought to be avoided is because inevitably a situation could come up where that conflict could be put to the test. In other words, the appearance should be avoided because if it's not, the exact situation we saw with Biden can happen, which is you end up where the conflict of interest is put to the test, where you have The father, who's the executive branch authority, now forcing the firing of his son's prosecutor. So if the appearance was enough to make people cringe, what the hell was it when Biden forced the prosecutor to be fired? But okay, real quick, and I know people have heard this before, so I'll move on to it real fast. Real quick, let's assume all of that's true. Let's assume that Biden really wanted his son investigated harder. And it had nothing to do with, wanting the prosecutor looking into his son to be fired. They knew Burisma was corrupt. They knew Zlochevsky was corrupt, right? That's Biden and Obama's own admission. And they said Shokin's the one. Shokin's holding it back that we can't get this corrupt organization, Burisma, and its founder, Zlochevsky, investigated. So, okay, fine. We'll assume that that's all true, okay? As ridiculous as that is. So what happens? They fire Shokin, and the investigation goes to the NABU. Now, the NABU was started with funds from the Obama administration, worked in tangent with the Obama administration. They're alleged to have buried cases before, and its owner and the leader of it, and several other people involved in it, were found guilty by a Ukrainian court, though in full interest, it was later overturned on a technicality. But there was evidence enough for a court to find guilty that organization, the NABU, and the person in charge of it, Sitnik, actually worked with the politician Lutsenko to interfere in the 2016 election to help Hillary. That's the agency. So the only thing I'm trying to say here is the agency that ended up finally getting the investigation into Burisma and its owner, Zlochevsky, was a huge Obama ally. So surely that agency, finally, because Obama and Biden and the IMF and the EU, they all said Burisma needed investigated. They were guilty, and its owner was guilty. So finally, they get the prosecutor they wanted. They forced the other guy out because they said, Zlochevsky and Burisma are so guilty, this prosecutor's what's holding up. So finally, they got rid of that stumbling block, and the NABU basically lets Zlochevsky off with a slap in the wrist. Buries the investigation within a year. Now, this isn't speculation. This happened. This is public notices. That's what happened. Zlochevsky didn't go to prison. Burisma didn't have to pay all the hundreds of millions of dollars that they allegedly robbed from the Ukrainian people back. They had to pay some back taxes, and that was it. A small fine. Now, at this point, why didn't the IMF and EU and Barack Obama and Joe Biden and all the media people and all the State Department officials that said, Shokin's corrupt, Burisma needs to go down, Zlochevsky needs to go down. We can't give $1 billion until we get Shokin out of there, so finally Burisma could be taken down. So they gave the $1 billion, and then the new prosecutor must be corrupt because we know that Burisma's corrupt. We know Zlochevsky's corrupt. That's what all those groups said. So where was their outrage when once they got the $1 billion, well, it turns out there's still corruption in Ukraine because they allowed this corrupt oligarch go. Did you hear Biden speak up? Did you hear Obama speak up? How about the IMF or the EU? How about all the State Department officials? Did you hear George Kent speak up, or Yovanovitch? Or Taylor, the people that have testified? Or Fiona Hill? Did you hear her speak up? No! In fact, they're now saying, yes, we know Burisma is corrupt. Yes, we know they've been investigated. But for Trump to suggest investigating them, that's really shady. Why would he be getting involved in prosecutorial decisions in the Ukraine? You can talk about Biden's feelings all you want. Biden's motivations, Biden's feelings. No need to investigate. We just trust he's a good dude. Well, what's the reality? What happened? We're told Biden said, I want my son's company investigated harder. He used $1 billion year tax dollars to extort Ukraine to fire the prosecutor looking into his son's company. It worked. The prosecutor got fired. It went to an agency that Biden was allied with, and they buried the investigation, and Biden never said another peep about it. And now he's suggesting it's criminal for Trump to want to investigate Burisma again. Now, I'd say that's pretty damn good evidence that the idea of, Biden's motivations was just to investigate Burisma is garbage. Even if it was, even if we believe that, his efforts backfired 180 degrees because Burisma, finally, the case into them was closed. It took Obama's allies at the NABU to finally bury the case. But no one speaks up. So that's what's going on there. They assume Trump's motivations must be bad. They assume Biden's motivations are good. And it's ridiculous. Now, to me, one of the biggest tells of Yovanovitch today was she continually talks, and this happened over and over again. The Democrats don't realize that they're making the case to investigate Hunter Biden, because at least 3 of them repeatedly asked her things like this. Why is it that we shouldn't be, the State Department shouldn't be political, shouldn't be getting involved in investigations? And she says, because it destroys the trust of the Ukraine, and, it leaves countries around the world see that political actions and domestic political actions are influencing our foreign policy. It makes people very distrustful, right? That's what she kept saying, things like that. But that's exactly what Joe Biden did, right? And this is what you constantly hear, and I'll get to more of this in a second. Well, it was okay for Biden to do it because he must have been doing it to benefit the United States. But when Trump did it, it was terrible. And let me give you another example. You heard both Wednesday and today. Castro, I think today, was going off about that. They get in their high horses like, Ukrainians died. We withheld that aid and Ukrainians died. They died. And Trump doesn't care. That's the human cost. The damn Russians killed Ukrainians while Trump held up aid. It's inexcusable. It's inexcusable. He's a monster. And no one says, excuse me, did you say that when Obama and Biden threatened to withhold aid? Oh, no. They were right to withhold the aid because they were fighting corruption. Oh, so the Ukrainian lives didn't matter when it came to the corruption that Obama and Biden wanted to fight. That ending of corruption just happened to be firing just one prosecutor and just the one who happened to be looking into Biden's son's company. But it was okay to risk the lives of the Ukrainian soldiers then. It's BS. And it's disgusting that they're using dead soldiers from any country as somehow to smear their opponent when it's selective. Now, if they'd have came out and said, yeah, it was heinous that Obama and Biden did that as well. Okay, but none of them are going to say that, are they? They just gloss right over it, and shame on the Republicans for not calling it out. But do you see how that works? So we hear all this reasons. They constantly say, threatening to withhold the aid, it sent a signal to Russia, and Russia's emboldened now, and it sent a signal to the Ukraine that we might not have their back, and it sent a signal to all of our diplomacy around the world that it could be domestic situations, how we're doing our foreign policy through our ambassadors, and it sent an admission to everyone in the State Department that was, demoralized knowing that this was all for domestic reasons, that aid was held up. Remember, we learned this from Wednesday. These State Department officials think they're in charge. They think they make policy. That's why Vindman and Fiona Hill in their closed-door testimony, and that's why Kent and Taylor in the testimony we saw Wednesday, they keep talking about Trump going against the established foreign policy. What they mean is, they went against the policy we like. Trump went against that, and you can't do that. How many times did Yovanovitch say that today? Well, you got to go through the proper channels, and, was it an act that was in tangent, or, that was working with State Department officials on foreign policy? Was Trump doing that? Was he working with the State Department to investigate corruption? No, he went off on his own. Who cares? You don't make policy. The arrogance of Yovanovitch and of Taylor and Kent is astounding. Yovanovitch, who is, how dare you go against the policy that I want? How dare you fire me? I'm entitled to that. No, you're not. You serve at the pleasure of the president. The president was elected. You weren't. And by the way, just as a matter of record, I'm tired of all this butt kissing. Oh, you work in the State Department. You must be an amazing person. You want to know who else is amazing people? My father-in-law, who's a truck driver. My brother-in-law, who's a welder. My dad, who worked in a factory for 20-something years of his life to put food on the table. Everyone I know that makes like $12, $13 an hour. That's like everyone I know in rural Pennsylvania. They're heroes. Who gives a crap? It's irrelevant to her testimony. I'm sick and tired of this. The Democrats and the media constantly play. Anytime that you want to question anyone in the intel community or the military-industrial complex or at the State Department or a politician, it's, they're so venerable, their service, blah, blah. Sure, I respect you for your service. If she was really in a situation where bullets were flying, that's terrible. And that's brave, even if I disagree with her politically. But that doesn't mean that I have to somehow take that into account when she's assuming she's the one who sets foreign policy, where she's incredulous that she got fired and smeared. Who cares? And she did way worse than that, which I'll get to later. I'm just sick and tired of it, and the Republicans go along with it. And I know it's for public perception. They can't come right out. But Jim Jordan did the best. It's just like, just don't butt kiss. Get right to the questions. You only have 5 minutes. Nunes should just say, hey, I speak for all the Republicans. Thank you for your service. Okay, moving on. Because you don't have enough time as it is. But it's just a little pet peeve of mine. But notice they don't give the Democrats, the media, like they didn't give Flynn that benefit of the doubt. They don't give Volker that benefit of the doubt or Sondland that benefit of the doubt, do they? No! That's different. How many times did we hear today, oh, Trump saying that the whistleblower committed treason, that's threatening. Yet the Democrats have been saying Trump and Don Jr. committed treason for 3 years. So are they admitting to threatening him? The Democrats say Trump's mean tweet today about Yovanovitch was harassing a witness tampering. Yet at the same time, we know that Giuliani might be called to testify, and we know his associate Lev Parnas is going to be called to testify. And so far, both days, the witnesses and the Democrats have smeared both of them. How isn't that witness tampering? Do you see the double standard? No, I don't care that the Democrats and the witnesses smeared Giuliani and Lev Parnas. That's their right. I don't care. But I'm not the one crying, oh, witness tampering. That's how fake they are. That's now, and I saw, who was it? Brett Baer said, oh my goodness, Trump's making a huge mistake. Now they'll add witness tampering legitimately as another charge. Are you kidding me? If that's the extent, if their case is so weak that another big plank of their case is now that Trump mean tweeted at Yovanovitch, that's really devastating for their case. And by the way, think of what the Democrats are saying here. They're basically saying it's impeachable that Trump fired this woman. That's impeachable. And then if Trump goes to the public and says, hey, listen, this woman sucked. That's why I fired her. That's also impeachable. So he's not allowed to fire her, and he's not allowed to explain to people why he fired her. Meanwhile, the Democrats could say any smear they want about Trump or his family or Giuliani or the people that they're going after. The double standard is ridiculous. Now, I know I'm meandering a little. To me, probably the biggest part of the testimony that shows the hypocrisy of Yovanovitch is she keeps going on about, oh, yes, it would be inappropriate for, to politicize, investigate. It would be inappropriate for a president to get involved in, asking another country's prosecutors to investigate his opponent and all of that stuff. Then finally, who was it? Ratcliffe, I think, says, okay, isn't that what Joe Biden did? And she says, no, I think that was different. That was different. Why? Why was it different? Either it's, and this is constantly what you see with the Democrat and the deep state people. Constantly. It is unbelievably frustrating to me. Now listen, I don't have the ear of Yovanovitch or Anderson Cooper or Rachel Maddow or Chuck Schumer or Adam Schiff or the Republican counterparts. I don't have their ear. My conversations with people are like my friends and family, people online, right? Regular people. Even in just those discussions, one of the most incredibly frustrating things is it is hard to get people to stay consistent on a position. So let's just real quick go over to Russia collusion. While this is all unfolding and back in 2017, and people are like, Don Jr., oh my God, he had a meeting in Trump Tower, he tried to get dirt on Hillary Clinton. My stance from day one was, I don't care. I basically expect, it might be crappy, you might roll your eyes and say, this isn't good, but I basically assume that campaigns at that level, and even at lower levels, are trying to get dirt on their opponents from any sources they can, whether they be domestic or foreign sources. I don't have a problem with that. Now, if you say, hey, if you give me this dirt, once I get elected, I'll do something for you, that's different. But just to get the dirt, I don't see the problem with it. And they said, no, it's a huge problem. It's a crime. Okay. What about it's a crime? Well, it's unethical, it's immoral, you're asking foreigners to help interfere. No, that's getting a thing of value from a foreign, the law says you can't do that. That's a crime. Well, then it comes out, Hillary Clinton and the DNC paid Fusion GPS to have a foreign spy get dirt on Trump from the Kremlin. Here's why it's worse. One, they paid. Second, they got the actual dirt. And third, the dirt was actually effective. Trump's team didn't pay. They just agreed to a meeting. They didn't get the dirt. And because they didn't get it, it wasn't effective. Yet all the people that told me, even just trying to get dirt on your opponent from before, all of a sudden it was, what was okay when Hillary did it? Why? Well, she paid an intermediary. But the law specifically says, if you look at it, it says it is illegal to get a thing of value directly or indirectly from foreign sources. Well, Trump's still guilty and she's not. Every single time. So you see that here. What they do is they control all of the, like they joked and said, there's no deep state, there's no deep state, there's no conspiracy. Even though Schumer told us, right? You can't criticize the intel community, they'll find 6 ways Sunday of getting back at you. The most powerful elected leader in the world has to be fearful of unelected bureaucrats and capitulate to them or they'll take him down, which is exactly what we're seeing. We are told, oh, no, that's not true, that's not true. You're a conspiracy theorist if you believe that. You're a conspiracy theorist. Every single time they seek to criminalize Trump or justify their own actions that are almost the exact same, if not worse, they default to, well, everyone at the State Department thought it was okay. Well, everyone in the intel community said this. So your argument is there is no deep state, but our defense is as long as everyone in the intel community or in the State Department agree with something, then that must be the case. And they don't see the contradiction in that. So Yovanovitch, all of a sudden, she doesn't think it was a big deal when Biden did what he did. But how is that possible? She told us that getting to interfere in the prosecutorial decisions of a foreign country, particularly the Ukraine, that jeopardizes our relationship with them. We heard the same thing from Kent and Taylor. Okay. Then why was it okay for Biden to try to force... You see what they're saying. And now just think of this objectively. Say you're a foreign country, right? The problem that we're told, and this was, I think Taylor said this the best Wednesday. He said, once we are telling other countries you have to prosecute this person, it shakes their faith that they're going to be able to act independently, right? They think, oh, we're just going to, this country, the U.S. is just going to bully us, and we're not going to have an independent legal system, and it's bad. That's how they're explaining it. What do you think if you're Ukraine, let's say me and all of you, we're the government of Ukraine, right? And on one hand, you have a foreign country's leader saying, hey, we'd really appreciate if you investigate this situation. Now, you might think that's crappy. Okay, let's say even that you still think like, it's a little much. But at the end of the day, that's not a huge deal because they're not asking you to make up evidence. So you can say, hey, we investigated, there was no wrongdoing. Okay. Now, juxtapose that to this and tell me which is worse. The administration says, hey, your head legal authority, your head prosecutor? Yeah, we want you to fire him. Wait, what? Yeah, he's got to be fired. And by the way, we're not really happy with the investigation you have going into my son's company. In fact, leave that part out because people say, that's not what happened. What's more of an interference in a foreign country? Forcing them to fire their lead prosecutor or asking their lead prosecutor to investigate something? Now, any objective person would tell you, well, forcing the guy out's the worst, right? Easily that's the worst thing. But yet somehow, the same people that say asking for an investigation is horrible. It politicizes the whole thing. It shakes Ukraine's faith in the system. They had no problem with Joe Biden forcing their prosecutor to be fired. Well, why? Well, everyone at the State Department thought that prosecutor was corrupt. Everyone at the EU thought that prosecutor was corrupt. But that's not what you said why it was wrong for Trump to do what he did. You said, that's us interfering in their system. That's us meddling. What they're saying is, well, it's okay for us to meddle as long as we think the reason for the meddling's good. Okay. Now you have to prove that Trump's reasoning, he didn't have a good reason. And clearly he did. Making sure, at the bare minimum, even if you believe Biden did nothing wrong, making sure that 1 billion US tax dollars wasn't used for extortion is a legitimate thing for the President of the United States to be investigating. Period. Ukraine would understand that. Dude, they used $1 billion to force this firing of the prosecutor. What Trump say in this phone call? I heard they fired this prosecutor. I heard he was a good guy. Yeah, we're looking into it. Now remember, at the time of Trump's phone call with Zelensky had no idea that aid had been put on hold. Yet, without any pressure whatsoever from Trump, he was like, yeah, damn right we're investigating that. And why wouldn't he? Picture how Zelensky came in. Zelensky was basically a stand-up comic who ran on one thing, being anti-corruption. Because he thought, and what we've been told, what I gather is, Ukraine's been incredibly corrupt for decades. So, Yovanovitch was corrupt. They had the Revolution of Dignity. What a joke of a name. But they had the revolution. They put Poroshenko in. Well, clearly, Poroshenko, the pro-Obama president, if he lost to a stand-up comedian, the people of the Ukraine must have not had faith that he wasn't corrupt, right? And so part of the corruption is, if you're Ukraine, and this is the honest to God's truth, by no means am I saying Russia are super great people or anything like that. The truth is, Ukraine is basically in a proxy battle for influence between the West and Russia. So, it goes back and forth. Yovanovitch was more Russian, Poroshenko, more Western interest. The people of the Ukraine are probably tired of it. They're like, we just want someone who's looking out for us. We're tired of puppets working for Russia. We're tired of puppets working for the United States. We want someone looking out for us. We're going to elect a stand-up comic who's basically running on one issue. I'm not corrupt. That comic gets in there and he's like, okay, what's been going on here? So the last administration in the United States forced the firing of our head prosecutor. I think I'm going to take a look at that. That sounds pretty damn reasonable to me. Now, Zelensky said he was going to do that without any pressure. He didn't even know the aid was being withheld. But Yovanovitch didn't have a problem with that. She thought it was fine. It's fine for Biden to force the firing of Shokin. So Shokin was corrupt, everyone tells us, okay? Now, the prosecutor, the Burisma case went to the NABU, but the new head prosecutor that was appointed was a man by the name of Lutsenko. Go back and listen to Joe Biden's big speech at the Council on Foreign Relations again. The one where he says, I told him they have 6 hours. We've all heard it at this point. What's he say? He says they replaced him with a prosecutor who was a solid guy at the time. That's Lutsenko. Now all of a sudden, this entire hearing, Yovanovitch kept saying, Lutsenko's corrupt, Lutsenko's corrupt. First off, when Schiff tries to say, right, and this was a huge mistake that no one called out, right? Schiff makes this argument. He's trying to argue, why is Yovanovitch important? Why is her testimony important? And he says, okay, let's go to the transcript, okay, of Trump's phone call with Zelensky. And he says, here he is saying, I heard this prosecutor got fired and he was a good guy. Yeah? And then he immediately says, oh, and our ambassador was this lady. She was bad. This woman, she was bad. Yeah? Well, because she was talking about that corrupt prosecutor, Lutsenko, and then was talking about you, that must prove that somehow, blah, 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 you had something to do with Biden. No, when Trump's talking about the corrupt prosecutor that was fired, he's talking about Shokin. The one Biden had fired. Biden didn't have Lutsenko fired. So Yovanovitch's beef with Lutsenko, the prosecutor it took over, that has nothing to do with Shokin. That has nothing to do with Biden getting forcing a prosecutor to be fired. Schiff's trying to link it to, see? Trump says this prosecutor Biden got fired and he's talking about you. That proves that you're somehow linked to Biden. Trump didn't like you. He didn't like Biden. He's trying to make this connection. That's garbage. When he's talking about the prosecutor, he's talking about Shokin, not Lutsenko. Now, you heard Yovanovitch say Lutsenko was corrupt. You heard Schiff say it in his closing statements. Trump defends the corrupt prosecutor Lutsenko, and he goes after the great person Yovanovitch. I want to issue a challenge to anyone, and obviously most of the people on here probably are people that agree with me most. Will you throw this challenge out to anyone, even those that think that this was a great day for the Democrats? You show me one piece of evidence that Yovanovitch or Taylor or Kent or any of the Democrats gave to show Lutsenko's corrupt. Just one piece of evidence. I didn't hear anything. I just heard them say, yeah, he's corrupt. We all know he's corrupt. We all knew he was corrupt. Wait a minute, didn't Biden call him a solid guy? Nah, he's corrupt. Isn't it funny that every single time we have a prosecutor in the Ukraine that ends up looking into people connected to Obama, they call them corrupt all of a sudden? Whoever the new prosecutor is, God forbid, he say, hey, we've been looking into this Burisma thing. Turns out these payments that Hunter Biden got, it's really shady. They'll say, oh, that prosecutor's corrupt. I mean, it's ridiculous. Do you really believe that? Do you really believe, oh, only the prosecutors that are looking into the Democrats are corrupt? Those are the only ones that are corrupt. The NABU, those prosecutors that were burying cases for Obama, they're not corrupt. They're great. And how dare we investigate them or suggest they're corrupt? So Yovanovitch just keeps saying, Lutsenko's corrupt. Everybody knows Lutsenko's corrupt. They know he's corrupt. Why? I don't even know. I don't even know what he was accused of doing. I don't know at all. The only reason that he's supposedly corrupt is because his testimony of what Yovanovitch said, Yovanovitch says didn't happen. That's it. But no one said, well, he was letting oligarchs off the hook. No one said that. And in fact, I made a video about a month and a half ago where I said this. Lutsenko specifically, I find hilarious because anytime there was an article where Lutsenko said something that looked like it could be detrimental to the Democrats, they'd say, oh, he's corrupt. But then he would have an article where they'd say, oh, Lutsenko recanted, or Lutsenko says that there was no evidence of Hunter Biden doing anything wrong. Now all of a sudden he's not corrupt when they're using him to put their narrative. Oh, Lutsenko said that there's no... Well, wait a minute. Is he corrupt or not? If he's corrupt, then why the hell are we taking his word if Hunter Biden or Burisma did anything illegal? And the truth is, they misrepresented Lutsenko the whole time. So, for example, Yovanovitch starts her testimony off saying Giuliani's team was terrible and John Solomon was terrible because they ran stories and peddled lies that said Lutsenko was given a do not prosecute list by her. But that's a lie. He later recanted and said, no, he didn't get that list. That's what Yovanovitch said today. That is a lie. A lie. Now, here's what the Democrats have been doing. This is what they did the entire time. And again, you should listen to me. I'm fantastic. I'm great. Not only am I good looking and impassioned, but I tend to be right a lot of times. I'm just kidding around. But no, I was on this. I said at the time, this is what happened. Lutsenko never said, I'm recanting that. He never said that. He said, well, okay, there wasn't a technical list. Like, she didn't hand me a piece of paper and say, these are the people you can't prosecute. But she did tell me a bunch of names of people I couldn't. Now, Lutsenko is speaking through an interpreter. He doesn't speak fluid English. It's a colloquialism, right? I feel dead as a dog. Oh, Lutsenko recanted. He really wasn't dead as a dog. He's just saying, and that's what he says now. He was like, dude, I was misinterpreted. There wasn't a technical list. If he's someone who speaks English, he could have came out and immediately and said, no. I didn't mean a list like an actual paper. I'm saying she said, here's 5 people. Here's Rob. Here's Samantha. Here's Taylor. Here's Courtney. Here's Dorothy. You can't prosecute them. That's what I'm saying. Not that she gave me a list of paper with them. And he's never changed his story once. But the media, for 3 months now, have been saying, oh, this story John Solomon reported about Lutsenko saying that he was given a list of people not to prosecute. That's a lie. That's a lie. He recanted it. Lutsenko recanted it. He said that never happened. It's just a lie. It's not a lie. And you don't believe me? Here's a story from the New York Times from 3 days ago. Now, keep in mind, the New York Times hates John Solomon. They can't address anything he says. So what they do is, they're better than this than most of the fake media. they'll bury the truth in with their opinion. So they'll say like, Solomon sucks, but yeah, he kind of was right about this. But Solomon sucks. But I'll give you the whole 3 paragraphs just so you can make up your own mind. But keep in mind, most of this is going to be saying Solomon and Lutsenko are crappy. But make up your own mind, all right? It's from the New York Times. In late March, Mr. Solomon and his team published pieces in The Hill making sensational claims of misconduct at the State Department. The American ambassador to Ukraine, that'd be Yovanovitch, a career Foreign Service officer who assumed her post during the Obama administration, had privately badmouthed Mr. Trump and separately had previously provided Yuri Lutsenko, Ukraine's prosecutor in general at the time, a list of individuals that Mr. Lutsenko should not prosecute. In conservative circles, where suspicion of anti-Trump officials working inside the government runs high, the allegation fit with the narrative that institutions like the State Department are rife with bad actors. But there was less to the do not prosecute list than it appeared. The State Department dismissed it as an outright fabrication. Mr. Lutsenko changed his story and acknowledged that what he's quoted describing in Mr. Solomon's report, quote, a list of people whom we should not prosecute, given to him by the ambassador, did not actually exist. Oh, sounds bad, right? Lutsenko recanted. Did you get all that language? Conservative, conspiracy, sensational claims, conservative circles. The State Department denies it. Lutsenko says the list didn't exist. Okay, final paragraph. Continue quoting. In an interview with the New York Times last month, Mr. Lutsenko blamed the confusion on the interpreter who handled the interview with The Hill. But he insisted that the ambassador, Yovanovitch, had in fact asked him not to target certain politicians and activists who worked with the embassy on its anti-corruption efforts. In other words, exactly what Lutsenko said. Now, Lutsenko doesn't understand because he doesn't speak fluent English those semantic word games that are going on. Well, they didn't give you a list, right? He's like, oh, the list, no list, no, told me name, not prosecute, but she didn't give you a list, though, right? Interpreter, don't know a list, tell me not to prosecute people connected to Obama. See, he said no list. That's been the media's take for 3 months. Not, Lutsenko is saying, whatever, I don't know what you're, like, was there a physical list? I guess not, but she gave me names not to prosecute. That's the important part. It's not as if, well, as long as they didn't write it down on a piece of paper, it was legit. That's stupid beyond belief. So now the New York Times is admitting, okay, Lutsenko is saying that he was told by Yovanovitch not to prosecute these people. Now, what did Yovanovitch say today, though? She said, Lutsenko recanted. I didn't give him a list. Now, did you notice what else that article said? Let me read it carefully. The State Department dismissed this as, quote, an outright fabrication. Okay? Now, let me read something to you. More recently, this is from a John Solomon piece. More recently, George Kent, remember, that's who testified Wednesday, the embassy's charge d'affaires in 2016 and now a Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, confirmed in impeachment testimony that he personally signed the April 2016 letter demanding Ukraine drop the case against the Anti-Corruption Action Center. Don't believe me? Here's the damn letter. Let me see if I can bring it up. Whoop. Not the most technically savvy. To Mr. Stolyark, the Deputy Prosecutor General in the Ukraine. Who's this signed by? Sincerely, George Kent. Third to last paragraph. Ready? Can you see this? Let me see if you can see it. All right, yeah. We are completely satisfied the assistance in question has only been used for those purposes and, as stated above, do not see any grounds from our perspective as the donor who provided the assistance for investigation into their use. Given the above, we reject the allegations that Mr. Sarvadilis or anyone with the Prosecutor General's office with whom we worked could have misused these funds since they were never under their control. Here's the important part. The investigation into the actions of the Anti-Corruption Action Center, based on the assistance that they have received from us, is similarly misplaced. Now, what did George Kent testify to yesterday? Do you remember? They said, who's the Anti-Corruption Action Center? Oh, it's an activist in the Ukraine that was partially funded by the Obama administration. Who else funds them? The Open Society Foundation. And who's in charge of the Open Society Foundation? George Soros, he says. So our State Department was telling them, don't prosecute this agency that us and Soros are giving money to. But wait a minute. Didn't I just read you? The New York Times said, didn't they say State Department officials? Let me read it again. The State Department dismissed this as an outright fabrication. But George Kent signed a letter in 2016 admitting, yes, we're telling the Ukraine to stop prosecuting the Anti-Corruption Action Center that we've given money to. He admits it. So Yovanovitch saying, oh no, we didn't that was the first thing she started with in her opening testimony. We didn't pressure anyone. Read the letter. The investigations into the actions of the Anti-Corruption Action Center based on the assistance they have received from us is misplaced. As voiced by European Ambassador Tobinsky, we are gravely concerned about this investigation, for which we see no basis, which appears to be an attempt to intimidate those in the Prosecutor General's office most committed to combating corruption. The United States is committed to supporting reforms with the Prosecutor General's office and to building its capacity to meet citizens' demands. Now wait a minute, this is the letter George Kent signed. Did the call with Zelensky say, Trump say, hey, quid pro quo? No. But what did the Democrats say? Well, he talked about, hey, we're glad your country's doing well. Hey, you should, can I make a request? Could you possibly look into CrowdStrike? Could you possibly look into Burisma and the prosecutor that Biden had fired? They said, oh, that's evidence of a quid pro quo if you read between the lines. Because he's saying, what'd Schiff say? Nice country you have there. It'd be a shame if something happened. Let me read this again. We are gravely concerned about this investigation, which we see no basis, which appears to be an attempt to intimidate people in the Prosecutor General's office. The United States is committed to supporting reforms with the Prosecutor General's office and to building its capacity to meet citizens' demands to recover stolen assets and counter corruption within the government. Now, wait a minute. If we had to read between the lines with Trump's call, is it them saying, hey, nice country you have there. We're giving you all this assistance to get the money that was stolen from you back and to fight corruption. It'd be a shame if you keep investigating these people that we funded. Maybe that cooperation would go somewhere. That's admitted. That's a signed letter by George Kent. But Yovanovitch is saying that never happened. They never pressured anyone. Now, if you listen to Yovanovitch's opening statement, it's very clever. Because she says, I never told them to drop an investigation. And she's like, but what we did do is sometimes we would have to talk to them and, impart our goals and our help in fighting corruption. And that's how she'll get out of saying that she perjured herself. She'll say, well, I didn't tell them to end the investigation. I just said, we really don't like that you're having this investigation. And, we're supporting you, so. Now, that's what they said was reason to impeach Trump. That was, if you read between the lines, that's a quid pro quo. But that's exactly what they're doing. So when Yovanovitch and Kent, who signed that letter, and Taylor are like, wow, we had a real problem with Trump trying to get involved in the domestic situation of Ukraine and their prosecutorial decisions. One, we know that's what Biden did. But second, we know that's what their own State Department, that's what Kent and Yovanovitch were doing. How dare they say they have a problem with Trump doing the same damn thing that they were doing, except less so. He wasn't forcing them to drop investigations. Let's go back to that Solomon article for a minute. This is George Kent. Kent also testified that he was aware of pressure the U.S. Embassy also applied on Ukraine prosecutors to drop investigations against a journalist named Vitaly Shabunin, a parliamentary member named Sergei Lutsenko, and a senior law enforcement official named Artem Sitnik. Shabunin helped for the Anti-Corruption Action Center that Soros funded, and Lutsenko and Sitnik were criticized by a Ukrainian court for interfering in the 2016 election by improperly releasing publicized secret evidence in an ongoing case against Trump campaign Paul Manafort. As for Sitnik, we're going to skip over Shabunin and Lutsenko. Sitnik's in charge of the NABU, right? The NABU, that's the agency, the same agency that was created by the Obama administration with funds from them. The same agency that worked in tandem with the Obama administration and dropped cases. The same agency that ended up getting the case into Burisma and had it dropped. This guy Sitnik, let's go to the Solomon article again. As for Sitnik, the head of the NABU anti-corruption police, Kent added, this is a quote from Kent, "We warned both Lutsenko and others that efforts to destroy the NABU as an organization, including opening up investigations of Sitnik, threatened to unravel a key component of our anti-corruption cooperation." Now, Kent works for the State Department, as does Yovanovitch. What did the New York Times piece say again? Lutsenko said he was given a list of names that he shouldn't prosecute. The State Department dismissed this as an outright fabrication. What? You saw the letter from George Kent. What did Kent say again? Hear about Sitnik? "We warned Lutsenko and others that efforts to destroy the NABU, including opening up an investigation into Sitnik, threatened to unravel a key component of our anti-corruption cooperation." In other words, hey, if you investigate this Sitnik guy, we ain't going to cooperate with you anymore. What was the cooperation? Billions of dollars that was being given. Or $1 billion. Now, this is the biggest story in the country today, right now. And I have not heard one person other than John Solomon and me talk about it. Literally, they buried an investigation into Ukrainian election interference into our system. Weren't we told for 3 years that foreign election interference is the biggest deal ever? Isn't that what we were told? Now wait, I want to bring up another article here and read this to you. I can't find the article. 1 second. Now, what you heard Yovanovitch say about the ledger being released, I know that's a lot of names. Let me read you this article again, okay? This is Financial Times. This is August 28th, 2016. Now, Yovanovitch was specifically asked about this person, Lutsenko. Before I get to this, I just want to make it real clear. The media has been telling you what Lutsenko said about being told not to prosecute people is a lie. Yovanovitch testified today, that's a lie. But we have testimony and official documents from the other witness, George Kent, that's admitting, yes, we did that. Specifically to Lutsenko. Why is Lutsenko corrupt again? The only reason they gave for corruption was he lied about being pressured. We now know he wasn't lying about that. So why is he corrupt again? Now explain to me, right? Explain to me if the entire case of, well, I was forced out because they made up all these lies about me, and that's terrible for Trump and Giuliani to do. But it turns out that part of it's not a lie. Do you think, let's just say that Putin loses the election, right? there's an election or there's a revolution, Putin's ousted, and a pro-Western president takes over in Russia. Dictator, whatever. Prime minister. And they're like, hey, you know what? We're going to investigate the Putin regime and make sure that they weren't interfering to help Trump in the 2016 election, right? Let's say that happens. And Trump says, I'm going to send my State Department over there and say, listen, we're not going to cooperate with you internationally unless you drop the investigation into the guys that you're accusing of interfering into the election to help Trump. What do you think the media and the Democrats would say about that? They'd go nuts. Well, election interference, it's an act of war. It's the biggest thing. We have to investigate it. Every single time there's any hint of election interference that helped Hillary or hurt Trump, they say, well, it's not a big deal. No big deal at all. Fiona Hill testified. Let's see if I can find this post. Fiona Hill testified. She said, in our closed-door testimony, they said, well, don't you think Lutsenko releasing this black ledger? And she took the same stance as Yovanovitch. All of them were like, well, we don't think that was a big deal. And Fiona Hill said, look, my family, they didn't vote because of election interference. They voted because of education and healthcare. So I really don't think releasing that ledger was that big of a deal. And then 2 paragraphs later, she's like, our Achilles heel is Russia interference. Yeah, you like those 12 trolls that were charged by Mueller? That, and which we hear about that all the time, right? Oh, we got to fight fake news online. Oh, the Russians were putting memes up. We got to fight memes. What do you mean the Mueller investigation was a sham? We got 12 people in Russia that we charged. They interfered. So putting fake memes on Facebook that accomplished nothing, we can see no proof that it did anything, forced the Hillary campaign to do anything whatsoever. That's a huge deal. But Ukrainians publicly admitting we're interfering to help Hillary, releasing this black ledger that was never proven to be real, the allegations in it, that actually forced the resignation of Manafort, that was then talked about in the media ad nauseum of, oh, Trump's got corrupt people around him. That's not worth investigating. Healthcare is more important. Do you see the ridiculous double standard? Either it's a big deal to investigate foreign election interference, or it isn't. We just spent 3 years investigating Trump for it. But now all of a sudden when it benefits Hillary, oh, this is no big deal. Yovanovitch said it today. Well, I didn't really think it was the government interfering. I didn't think it was a top-down. People are going to say stuff like that. People, whatever they say, No kidding. You didn't have a problem with that. She didn't think that was their ambassadors acting improperly or their politicians acting improperly. But with Giuliani going over, oh, that's a huge deal. That's jeopardizing a relationship. That could rightfully make the Ukrainians angry. Now, did they, though? Right? Did they interfere in the election? Back to this article. Financial Times, August 28, 2016. I've talked about this article nonstop for 2 months. Jim Jordan brought it up today in the testimony, but he didn't get to the best parts of it. August 28, 2016. This is 2 months before the election, the 2016 election. For years, Sergei Lutsenko, a top Ukrainian anti-corruption campaigner, worked to expose kleptocracy under former President Yovanovitch. Now he's focusing on a new perceived pro-Russian threat to the Ukraine, U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump. The prospect of Mr. Trump, who has praised Ukraine's archenemy Putin, becoming leader of the country's biggest ally has spurred not just Mr. Lutsenko, but Kiev's wider political leadership to do something they would never have attempted before. You ready for this? Quote, intervene, however indirectly, in a U.S. election. Intervene in a U.S. election. Lutsenko, a member of parliament, and Kiev's wider political leadership to intervene in a U.S. election. This is 2 months before the election. Now, the same damn media outlets that for 3 years are going to tell us, oh my God, foreign interference, we have to do everything we can. It's an attack on our country. They knew 2 months before the election that the Ukraine was intervening to help Hillary. And they didn't say a damn word. This article's not saying, oh my God, we need to investigate. It's praising them. Yes, great. Trump's terrible. Thank God people are intervening. Mr. Lutsenko, this is quoting again, Mr. Lutsenko and Ukraine's Anti-Corruption Bureau, that's the NABU, published a secret ledger this month that authorities claim show millions of dollars of off-the-book cash payments to Manafort, Trump's campaign manager. Manafort vigorously denies wrongdoing, subsequently resigned from his campaign role. But Mr. Lutsenko and other political actors in Kiev say they will continue their efforts to prevent a candidate who recently suggested Russia might keep Crimea from reaching the summit of American political power. This is a quote from Lutsenko. A Trump presidency would change the pro-Ukrainian agenda in American foreign policy, Mr. Lutsenko, an investigative journalist turned MP, told the Financial Times. For me, it was important to show not only the corruption aspect, but that he is a pro-Russian candidate who can break the geopolitical balance in the world. More quotes. If the Republican candidate loses in November, some observers suggest Kiev's actions may have played a small role. Quote, Ukraine's anti-corruption activists have probably saved the Western world, said Shakostov, a Western-based academic, especially in Russia and Ukraine. The revelations provoked fury among former Regions Party backers. Asked by telephone about Mr. Manafort's activities in Ukraine, a former Yovanovitch loyalist, now playing the lead role in the Regions Party's successor, called Opposition Bloc, let loose a string of expletives. He accused Western media of, quote, working in the interest of Hillary Clinton by trying to bring down Trump. Though most Ukrainians are disillusioned with the country's current leadership and stalled reforms and lackluster anti-corruption efforts, Mr. Lutsenko said events of the past 2 years had locked Ukraine onto a pro-Western course. The majority of Ukraine's politicians, he added, quote, are on Hillary's side. Do you hear this? This is admitted. Now, I've had people tell me that's an opinion article. It's not. I've had people tell me it's a conspiracy theory to say the Ukrainians interfered. The damn guy who interfered admitting it. He's quoted. And he's saying, yeah, I did it because we're all on Hillary's side. We hate Trump's policies. You're damn right we released that ledger, and we're going to keep doing it. And it's not just me. It's people in the Anti-Corruption Bureau, and it's other politicians. Now that's public knowledge before the election that they're interfering in the election. Yet Yovanovitch and George Kent and Taylor and all the Democrats say, that's not a big deal. That's not a big deal. Now, Russian trolls putting memes up on Facebook and Pokemon Go, that's a huge damn deal. We had to have a 3-year investigation. Mueller charged them with the crime. Here's another defense I got. Hey, Ukrainians can do whatever they want. What the hell? Who cares? Unless you could prove that a DNC operative did something with them, which I'll get to, because there's credible allegations that's exactly what happened. But unless you can prove that, who cares what Ukraine did? But that's not what these same people were saying with Russia. We know for a fact that no American, no one connected in Trump's orbit, after a 3-year investigation by the FBI and Mueller, not one person was charged with illegally conspiring with Russians to affect the election. Not one. Are Democrats saying, well, okay, no big deal then. I guess the Russians can do whatever the hell they want. Has anyone said that? No, they said it's a big deal. It was an act of war. The Mueller investigation was important. We got those damn Russian trolls. We got them. Thank God, keeping us safe. Indictments came down. We got those Russian trolls. Well, what about these Ukrainian politicians admitting to leaking evidence illegally because they hate Trump's policies and they're going to keep fighting against them? They're all pro-Hillary. No big deal. We only care about education and healthcare anyways. Politico article. Right? That goes on from there. This is Ken Vogel and David Stern. Ken Vogel now works at the New York Times. This is from 2017. Politico, a left-leaning outlet. Donald Trump wasn't the only presidential candidate whose campaign was boosted by official former Soviet bloc country. Ukrainian government officials tried to help Hillary Clinton and undermine Trump by publicly questioning his fitness for office. They also disseminated documents implicating a top Trump aide in corruption and suggested they were investigating the matter, only to back away after the election. And they helped Clinton's allies research damning information on Trump and his advisors, a political investigation found. A Ukrainian-American operative who was consulting for the Democratic National Committee met with top officials in the Ukrainian embassy in Washington in an effort to expose ties between Trump, top campaign ad Manafort, and Russia, according to people with direct knowledge. Now, I'm not going to go into Alexandra Chalupa and all the stuff she did. Suffice it to say, there is credible evidence to at least warrant an investigation. There's public admissions that she was in the Ukraine talking to Ukrainian officials. She just says, well, I wasn't really seeking dirt. Now, we know that they got dirt. We just don't know if she was actively seeking it. But we had to investigate Don Jr., where there was an accusation that he was talking to Russians that might have dirt, right? That warranted an investigation. We needed a super big time investigation into that, right? But with Chalupa, no. No, don't have to investigate this. It's a conspiracy theory to suggest investigating it. So says Yovanovitch. So says Kent. So I'm not going to go through all of this about Chalupa, but I do want to get to the bottom of this, where Lutsenko is quoted again. A former Ukrainian investigative journalist and current parliamentarian named Lutsenko, who was elected in 2014, held a news conference to highlight the ledgers and urge Ukrainian-American law enforcement to aggressively investigate Manafort. Quote, I believe and understand the basis for these payments are against the law. We have proof from these books, Lutsenko said. At the time, Lutsenko suggested his motivation was partly to undermine Trump. For me, it's important to show not only the corruption aspect, but that he's a pro-Russian candidate. One second, there's one other thing I'm looking for. An operative who has worked extensively in Ukraine, including as an advisor to Poroshenko, that was the president, said it's highly unlikely that Lutsenko or the Anti-Corruption Bureau would have pushed the issue without tacit approval from the president and his allies. Poroshenko critics have gone further, suggesting the Bureau is backing away from the investigation into Manafort because the ledgers they may have been doctored or forged. So here's the ending of this story. They said, oh, we're investigating Manafort. We got this black ledger. They released the details in the black ledger. None of the details in that ledger, by the way, led to the prosecution of Manafort. He was prosecuted for other things by Mueller. Failing to register as a foreign lobbyist, tax evasion, things like that. But Ukraine, as soon as the election was over, as soon as Trump won, they dropped the investigation into Manafort. And so people that were upset about it was like, look, that's because you made up the stuff in the black ledger. Now there's one more thing I want to show you at this. So we have the admission, right? We have an admission from Lutsenko that he was working with the National Anti-Corruption Bureau. Released this ledger. Other politicians were there. They're all pro-Hillary. They did it to stop Trump. We have that. That's quotes from him. Right? Now, one second. Here's the last article I want to bring up. Maybe if it's... Now, if all of that doesn't convince you, remember what was said. Sitnik, the guy who was in charge of the NABU, right? He's the one. Remember, I'll read it to you again. As for Sitnik, the head of the NABU, Kent added, quote, we warned Lutsenko and others that efforts to destroy the NABU, including opening up investigations of Sitnik, threatened to unravel a key component of our anti-corruption cooperation. This is from the Kiev Post, December 12, 2018. Publication of Manafort payments violated law, interfered in U.S. election, Kiev court rules. 2 Ukrainian officials violated the law by revealing information about millions of dollars of alleged illegal cash payments to a lobbyist and former chair of the President Trump's campaign, Paul Manafort, a Kiev district court said on December 12th. In reviewing an administrative case filed by lawmaker Borislav Rosenblatt, the court concluded that Sitnik, director of the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of the Ukraine, and a parliamentarian named Sergei Lutsenko acted illegally when they revealed that Manafort's surname and signature were found in so-called black ledger outside of Yovanovitch. The black ledger is alleged to have been a secret accounting book showing suspicious payments to a range of individuals. In a statement on its website, the court also appeared to describe the 2 men's actions as constituting interference in the 2016 United States presidential election. The release of the information about the Black Ledger, which was part of the pre-trial investigation, quote, led to interference in the electoral processes of the United States in 2016 and harmed the interests of the Ukraine as a state. The court also declared that Lutsenko acted illegally and termed his actions, quote, interference in the external politics of Ukraine by spreading the above-mentioned information about Paul Manafort. A Ukrainian court said that Sitnik and Lutsenko interfered in the 2016 election in the United States. And they were pissed about it because it damaged relationships with the United States. And it broke their laws. Now, while this is going on, while this investigation's happening, what's the State Department doing? What's George Kent doing? What's Yovanovitch doing? Let me read that to you again. We warned Lutsenko and others that opening up an investigation of Sitnik threatened to unravel a key component of our anti-corruption cooperation. So we have Lutsenko, who admitted that he worked with the NABU and its head Sitnik to interfere, to help Hillary. They released this black ledger. We have evidence that they were doing it with a DNC operative. And we have a damn Ukrainian court that found them guilty. Which again, the case was later overturned on a technicality. But the evidence was there. That they were interfering in the U.S. election. Yet not one media person other than John Solomon picked this up and ran with it. Not one Democrat said, holy cow, foreign interference into our election admitted? And the State Department, and this is the incredible thing. Everything Trump's been accused of pales in comparison to this. Everything. Everything. What's Trump accused of? Wanting an investigation into Biden. The bluntest terms, the worst possible extrapolation for Trump is he threatened to withhold aid unless there was an investigation into Biden. Okay, let's say that. You might think that's pretty bad. Dude, we've been told for 3 years that foreign election interference is the biggest deal in the world. We now know that there was foreign interference from the Ukrainians. They admitted it. A Kiev court said that it happened. Kiev was pissed about it. And what's the State Department doing? Saying, drop that investigation or we'll end our cooperation with you. Is there any wonder that the court case was overturned on a technicality? And where's the media? Where's the Democrats? Oh, they're so concerned with us meddling in prosecutorial decisions of the Ukraine. They're spreading the lie. Lutsenko's a liar. He's corrupt. The State Department and Yovanovitch said that none of this ever happened. There was no pressure. Meanwhile, their other star witness, George Kent's testifying. Yes, it did happen. It absolutely happened. Specifically to Lutsenko. Now, what's Lutsenko done again that makes him corrupt? That Schiff was talking about? That Yovanovitch was talking about today? Corruption, you buried an investigation into foreign election interference because it helps your side. And where are the Republicans? These aren't opinion articles, they're damn quotes. Why do we have incompetent people running the show? Why am I talking about that? Me and John Solomon. You hear anyone else talking about it? Hear Jim Jordan? He brought up the Financial Times article, right? But he didn't talk about Lutsenko admitting to interfering in the election, saying that most politicians are pro-Hillary, that they're going to keep doing it, that he worked with the Anti-Corruption Bureau. He didn't say any of that. Instead, they said, thank you for your service, Miss Yovanovitch. Thank you. You're a noble person. No, she's not! She's bearing investigations into election interference because it benefited Hillary. Why isn't every American pissed about this? Why isn't every news outlet running the story 24/7? If Trump went to a foreign country and had his State Department tell them, you need to stop investigating possible collusion my team had with your country in 2016, it would be news 24/7 until he was out of office. There'd be 1 million people marching in Washington right now. But not only does no one give a shit when it's these people, they're actually called as credible witnesses against Trump. Now, you don't think that they have a reason to want Trump outed? God forbid Trump do an investigation. All of a sudden, it's going to look pretty damn bad for George Kent and Yovanovitch when not only was there Ukrainian election interference, but they're the ones who buried it. And they feel totally justified. That was just us fighting corruption, they say. Please spread this information. Please. I did an entire video on this. I get 10, 12 people to watch it. No one's talking about it. She lied. They're actively working to stop foreign countries from investigating election interference. Period. End of story. That is admitted. Either she's lying or George Kent's lying. But no one will get charged. They never do. Roger Stone's going to jail for 50 years for supposedly lying. But with impunity. The pro-Democrat, the pro-deep state intel people lie with impunity. I hope this doesn't make... Here, let me share this video, please. I have tweets on, go to my Twitter. It's my pinned tweet. Share this information, please. Why isn't this the top story? Not they buried an investigation into Hunter Biden getting a bunch of money. Not they buried an investigation into some Soros connected. That crap's all bad if that happened. An investigation into election interference. Admitted. 2 months before the election, they're bragging in the mainstream media in the United States. The same media that would foam at the mouth for 3 years. Oh my God, the Russian trolls, election interference. Oh my God, oh my God. Ah. 2 months before the election, they all know. They've known about the Politico article since 2017. And what do? People like BuzzFeed, this is the response I got. Well, here's a guy at BuzzFeed saying that one of the sources, Teleshenko, see, one of the connections to Chalupa, the DNC operative, was a Ukrainian embassy worker named Teleshenko. And guess what Teleshenko's been up to since then? He's got interviewed by Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh. He's palled around with Rudy Giuliani, so, So what? What does that prove? Well, Chalupa might have had good read. Chalupa denies it. She said she talked to them, but she wasn't getting dirt. Okay, there's more than enough there for an investigation, though. But instead, the opposite happened. Instead of the U.S. saying, oh, okay, we better investigate this, that's what we said about Trump, they said that the allegation of foreign election interference and possible collusion with the political party against a rival was so significant under Trump that they say we had to use the unverified dossier to spy on Trump-connected people. We had to. Because the accusation was so severe. Were Trump people working with Russians to help them interfere in the election? That accusation's so bad, we had to investigate it. Okay, we have an accusation of Alexandra Chalupa. She admits to talking to Ukrainians. Now, her version's different in her defense, different than Teleshenko, the embassy worker's version. But they both admit that she was talking, and we know the outcome. We know that Lutsenko and Sitnik were basically publicly admitting during the election that they were interfering, releasing this black ledger. That alone's enough for an investigation, let alone we know there was a DNC operative over there as well. Did she ask for the dirt or not? We don't know yet. Why isn't there an investigation? Where was James Comey? Where was Bob Mueller? Wasn't Mueller tasked with investigating foreign election interference? Oh, but only that hurt Hillary. And so finally, a government's like, we'll investigate it. Ukraine's like, damn right, we'll investigate it. No, you can't. Or we'll end our cooperation with you, says George Kent, says Yovanovitch. But Yovanovitch, she lost her job, her family. Oh my God, she's at Georgetown now, and oh my God. It's just, her life's so hard. She's a hero. She's a hero. You know, that's a hero. Here's the other excuse I had. Well, they were just fighting corruption. And again, that's what Yovanovitch will say. We thought that Sitnik being investigated was corrupt to investigate him. Isn't that convenient? So again, we have to assume their motivations are always pure. They can pressure any government to start or close any investigation they want, and we have to just take their word. This is all in the name of fighting corruption. But if Trump wants any investigation, no matter how shady things look, nope, that's corrupt for him to do that. When we have a public admission by someone like Lutsenko saying, yeah, I interfered in the election. What's Yovanovitch say? What's Kent say? Well, we didn't think it was the whole Ukrainian government, and no big deal. What's Fiona Hill saying? Oh, I wasn't bothered by that. I'm more concerned about healthcare. But when it comes to Russian trolls, 3-year investigation. That's how stupid this is. No one brought it up today. Shame on the Republicans. Shame on them. Let me go through more of what I wrote here today. People were saying, the entire State Department said Lutsenko was corrupt. I don't care. Show me proof. The entire intel apparatus told us Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. They told us that backing Fidel Castro was a good idea. Overthrowing the Shah in Iran was a good idea. Backing the rebels in Libya was a good idea. Backing the rebels in Syria was a good idea. They told us the Afghanistan war was a good idea. They told us in the 70s when we were arming the Taliban that was a good idea. I'm so tired of this. Yes, I get it. There is a deep state. They're corrupt. Using them saying, well, the corrupt deep state all agrees. I don't give a shit at all. Hey. Ooh. 1 second. I'll be right back. My wife's going to flip out. My dog just ate one of her couch pillows. Yeah, well. Let me go a couple more things before I have to end here. Now, the Democrats will allow Yovanovitch to testify, right? And they'll allow her to say Lutsenko's corrupt. They'll allow her to say there was nothing with the black light. Let me reverse here. She starts off in her testimony. She says, "Let me tell you some things that I'm not aware of. I wasn't around. My tenure came after this ledger got released, so I don't know anything about that. And I left before Trump's calls with Zelensky, so I don't know anything about that." Okay? So she's admitting she doesn't know the ins and outs of this ledger that was released. She admitted that, right? Yet we now know from George Kent's testimony that her State Department was pressuring Ukraine to drop investigations into that ledger and election interference. Now, if she's just admitted she's not qualified to speak on it, why is she pressuring another country to drop the investigation? Getting to kind of the bottom here. Here's something I said that's kind of a joke, but what was the relevance of her testimony again? She's upset that she got fired. Well, he had the right to fire me, but I didn't appreciate that he said mean things about me and smeared me. That's not a crime. The Democrats say mean things about Republicans all the time. Again, if he was trying to fire her for this conspiracy that she suggests, notice how every time we believe something, it's a conspiracy theory. If I believe the quotes of George Kent and the quotes of Lutsenko, that's me engaged in a conspiracy theory. But her theory of, well, I was fired because they wanted to super secretly replace me with someone that would do Trump's bidding and investigate Biden. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's legit. Even though that's not what happened. Who was put in charge? Ambassador Taylor, who was the first star witness. Now, if you were really going to be corrupt, why would you put Taylor in charge again? But here's what I wrote to that. So she's just complaining about getting fired. When I was a teenager, I got fired from Burger King. The Burger King manager said really mean things about me that I just felt weren't true when they fired me. It lowered the morale of all other Burger King employees, and it was at a critical time when our sandwiches needed to come out the fastest. Customers completely lost faith in our Burger King management. So it's time to impeach Trump, right? Isn't that it? In other words, all of her arguments, well, this could have jeopardized our relationships and this and this and this and this and this and this, right? All of that, that's just your opinion that Trump's job performance is poor. That's not a crime. That's not a reason to impeach. That'd be like me saying, well, Obama drawing a red line in the sand with Syria and then not acting on it. Well, impeach. Because that could have jeopardized our position in the world. People thought, oh, the U.S. isn't serious. You could just push them and they won't retaliate. So, time to impeach. No, not time to impeach. If that's a concern of yours, you could say, oh, yeah, I'm not going to vote for Obama. I think he made a big mistake. But it's not a crime. It's not a misdemeanor. All right, let me get to some of the more comments I had. She kept saying that when Trump criticized her and questioned her ability to do the job and spread mean things about her, that hurts our relationship with the Ukraine because it makes them question our system and whether or not we're all have a bipartisan unified stance, right? In other words, everybody needs to come together and we all have to have one policy, Republican or Democrat. And when you have the leader, Trump, saying, I don't trust this official, I don't trust that official, that damages our ability to do diplomacy, okay? That's what they said. And the Democrats all agreed. Oh, yeah, that's a terrible thing. If that's true, right? Now hear me out in this, right? What do you think it does to our diplomacy when the Democrats call Trump a Russian stooge for 3 years? You don't think that says, you don't think this very impeachment hearing, if you're Ukraine right now and you're like, wait, what? We had this phone call with Trump. It was nothing. So with the Obama administration, they're forcing us to fire prosecutors, right? And their State Department's telling us you have to drop investigations into this group and that group, all connected to Obama. And no one said a peep. There wasn't a peep from Republicans, from Democrats, from the media. Now Trump gets in, and he talks to our new president, Zelensky, and he's just like, hey, I'd kind of like you to look back into what was going on in 2016. And all of a sudden, they're trying to remove him from office? You don't think they're saying, wait, what? What do you think? If you're Ukraine right now, you have to be going like, holy cow. These Democrats, there's such a rift right now in America. 50% of the people want the president of the United States removed for a 5-minute phone call that he had with our president. Are you going to cooperate diplomatically with Trump because you're worried, well, if I cooperate with Trump now and he loses in 2020, then I'll be retaliated against by the Democrats. If I don't cooperate with Trump, maybe he'll retaliate against me. Who knows? With the impeachment hearing, it's certainly far more damaging, and all the claims that have been made against Trump is far more damaging than Trump going on Twitter and talking about Yovanovitch being bad. And remember, Solomon reported, and I don't see a direct quote of this, but I believe it because it intuitively makes sense, that Ukrainian prosecutors were pissed with Yovanovitch. That's part of the reason that Trump wanted them gone. She was detrimental to our relationship with the Ukraine, which makes sense because she was telling their prosecutors, you can't prosecute this person. You can't prosecute this person. And so they're like, get her out. We don't want to deal with her. Our Attorney General's Bill Barr. Imagine that if China came to us and said, hey, guess what? We're not going to have a trade relationship with you anymore unless you fire Bill Barr. What do you think that would do to Americans? What do you think the average citizen in the United States would say? Oh, okay. We need our Chinese trinkets, so... No, they'd say, what? Well, that's how Ukraine felt. We don't want these people telling us what to do. I'm wrapping up here. My wife's literally going to blow a gasket when she gets here, when she sees these pillows chewed up. So... She says, okay, and I'm wrapping up here, but she says that she did an excellent, this is towards the end, she said she did an excellent job and was effective at fighting corruption. And she says the prosecutor Lutsenko was corrupt and didn't investigate Burisma well enough. Well, then apparently she didn't do a very good job, huh? If her argument is the head prosecutor was corrupt while I was there, and the oligarch Zlochevsky, nothing happened to him while I was there, and Burisma, the company he ran, nothing happened to him while I was there. So the head prosecutor's corrupt. The head corrupt oligarch that we've been after for 2014 is walking away with a slap on the wrist. What did she do again to fight corruption? And why would it be illegitimate for Trump to want to investigate that corruption? Give me 1 second. I'll be right back. I think I'm in a lot of trouble. My wife's pretty upset about this pillow situation. So I'm going to end here soon. So the one Democrat asked if she had a right to request information from Ukrainian investigators. But if she did it with, and she says yes. And he goes, okay, but if you did it for personal reasons, it wouldn't be allowed. And he says, that's just like Trump. Because the Republicans keep saying Trump has the right to fire an ambassador if he wants. And they're trying to make the argument, yes, but not for personal reasons. Well, that's not true. Actually, Trump can fire an ambassador for any reason he wants. He really can. And it's not a crime. So it's not exactly what they're suggesting here. In other words, the presidency has more of a defense than anyone else in this country of whether or not he could actually commit crimes. But even still, let's take at face value what they're suggesting here. Trump had the right to fire her, but he did it for illegitimate reasons. But they don't have any proof of that. Again, that's them looking into their motivations. How do they know what Trump's reasoning was? They just say, oh, it had to be for corrupt reasons. Because they're spreading out. Let's assume for a second that Yovanovitch is right? Or Yovanovitch is right. Okay? Let's assume she's right. Now, I think I provided pretty damn good evidence that she's wrong, that she's lying. But let's say she's right. And so here's what's happening with Yovanovitch. She's dismayed. Here's Rudy Giuliani and these others. They're smearing her, spreading these lies, because we're assuming she's right. Okay? And then Trump fires her. Isn't it entirely plausible that Trump believed the lies? Trump said, she's talking crap on me. She's corrupt. She's helping she's forcing prosecutors to drop investigations into Obama-connected people. Now, that's true. That did happen. But we're going to assume it's not true. In order for it to be corrupt, Trump would have to know that that's not true and still fire her. If he legitimately believed it, then it's not corrupt for him to fire her. It's that simple. Now, this argument, yes, you have the right to do it, but what was your motivation? Couldn't we make the same argument about Joe Biden? So again, we get back to the crux of it. The media, the Dems, and the never-Trumpers have set up a situation. Again, Ben Shapiro is the best example. When this story first broke, I did a video about how ridiculous Ben Shapiro's stance was. Because his stance was, I don't think that Trump did a quid pro quo, but if he did, that's reason to impeach. That's still Ben's stance. And then he says, well, yes, Biden did do a quid pro quo, but I don't think that was that bad. What are you talking about? All of the Democrats' efforts thus far are just trying to prove that Trump used a quid pro quo or bribery or extortion, whatever buzzword they want to call it. Even if we concede everything that Taylor and Kent said, everything, we concede every single word they said is true. Trump was going to withhold aid unless they investigated Joe Biden specifically and Hunter Biden, right? Even if all that's true, the only way it's a crime or corrupt is if Trump did it for corrupt reasons. His motivation was for personal benefit only. And they can't prove that. They haven't put forth one witness to show that. Who will they put forth? Because it is entirely, the only way they'd be able to prove his intent is to prove that if he specifically said, I'm doing this to get rid of Biden because he's my opponent, I don't care about corruption. Or if you could prove there is literally no other legitimate reason. I could give you a legitimate reason right off the bat. That's quite plausible. He wanted to end corruption. He wanted to make sure that Biden didn't use $1 billion in a corrupt way of tax dollars. Okay, that's entirely plausible. It's also entirely plausible that Joe Biden wanted that prosecutor fired for legitimate reasons. That's plausible. But there's certainly reason to investigate. And if there's reason to investigate, then Trump asking Russia or asking Ukraine to investigate isn't corrupt. Now, Yovanovitch herself pressured Ukrainians. That's what I showed you from the George Kent quotes to drop investigations. And she admits, this Democrat asked her, she says, yes, I have the right to do that. I have the right to talk to the intelligence counterparts in the Ukraine and ask them stuff, and the investigative counterparts in the Ukraine. I have that right. And she admits, but not for personal reasons. Okay, well, if you only did that and only pressured them to drop investigations when it was investigations that could be harmful to Barack Obama or the Democrats, that could be for an improper motivation. So it warrants an investigation. But there won't be one. And it certainly is reason enough to terminate her. Now, Yovanovitch said repeatedly, the intel community all agreed that Russia interfered, so that somehow makes it okay not to question if Ukraine needs investigated or interfered. Now, think about this claim. They keep asking her, well, what about this? What about this legend? What about these Ukrainian politicians? What about what they're quoted as saying? They didn't do a good enough job, in my opinion, but okay. What about it? What about it? What about it, right? That's what they're saying. And she says, remember, the intelligence communities have all agreed that the real interference occurred in Russia. Well, there's several things to say about that. One, I'm no genius, but do you think, and this might blow your mind. All right, you ready for this? More than one country could have interfered. Oh my goodness. Like, she doesn't realize that? Well, the intelligence community said it was Russia. Okay. Did they investigate Ukraine? I haven't seen any proof of that. In fact, the number one, and I've talked about this before, Mueller was tasked with investigating Russia collusion, right? Or Russian interference. The number one example of the most effective Russian interference, if we believe the Democrats' version, is the Steele dossier and the allegations within it, and that Steele dossier that was used to spy on an American citizen that was connected to the Trump campaign, and that some polls show as high as 45 to 50% of Democrats still believe the allegations in the P dossier, still believe that Trump's a Russian asset. Even after Mueller investigated for 3 years and couldn't prove any of it, they still believe it. And we were told the reason Russia interfered was to cause division in our country. Well, the Kremlin agents were the source of that dossier. That is clearly the best example of interference into our system that there is. Mueller didn't say word one about the dossier in his report. Why? When he was asked specifically about it, what did he say? Oh, that's beyond my purview. Huh. So if that was beyond his purview to investigate, do you think Ukrainian election interference was within his purview? So again, how is it relevant that the intel agency said Russia interfered? Okay, great. Did Ukraine interfere as well? Saying, well, the intelligence agency said Russia. That's fine. And how bad is she going to look if the Durham report comes out and shows that intel agencies were either violating policies of the intel agencies or committing crimes in their investigation into the Russia investigation in the Trump committee? Whoops! How bad do you look then, right? You mean you were actively subverting an active investigation into Ukrainian election interference, and your reasoning is, well, I assume the intel agencies would have told us if there was something shady going on. And now we know the intel agencies were corrupt and against Trump. Now what's your excuse? Maybe that's why you should be doing your job. Maybe that's why you shouldn't be interfering in foreign prosecutorial decisions. Now, here's another thing I haven't heard anyone bring up. Constantly, one of the things I've said and Trump said over and over again is read the transcript. The transcript's out. Read the transcript. The transcript's out. Read the transcript. It's out. Read the transcript. And instead they go, no, we need more witnesses who didn't hear the phone call. We need more witnesses that didn't read the phone call to tell us about the transcript. Why? You could read it yourself. You show me in the transcript what you're saying is wrong. Read it. And they have nothing to say. Well, we need another person to interpret it for us. And what they say is they're like, oh, well, it wasn't a direct transcript. I've heard this over and over. It wasn't a direct transcript. It was just people writing down what they remembered of the transcript. It might not be. There could have been. Maybe they forgot to put down or they corruptly left out that Trump said, this is a quid pro quo. Manufactured, like Schiff's parody. Make up dirt on Biden. Maybe they forgot to put that in, right? Maybe that's what happened. Well, Vindman told us that's not the case. Vindman, who's another witness against Trump, he said, yeah, the transcript's almost entirely accurate. The only thing he quibbled about was he said that at one point it had Zelensky saying the company, but in reality Zelensky said Burisma. Okay, that doesn't change anything. Everybody assumed when he said the company they meant Burisma. So that doesn't really change anything. But still they said, well, it's not, show me a word-for-word transcript. Other than that, if you can't, then blah, blah, blah. Yet here we have, Yovanovitch admits she didn't hear, right? She was not there. She didn't even work there anymore when the phone call happened. Not only was she not in the room, she didn't even work in the agency. She wasn't even involved with the Ukraine policy anymore. Out. She's working at Georgetown now. Yet over and over, they would say, isn't it true that after Trump mentioned your name, he then mentioned the prosecutor? Yes, it is. How's she know that? Well, she read the transcript. Well, wait a minute. So the transcript, when it's saying things that they want to talk about and think are damaging to Trump, that's accurate. And it's okay to ask a witness who's admitted she didn't even hear the phone call. It's okay to assume her reading of the transcript is legitimate to answer, well, didn't Trump then say this? Yes, because the transcript's good enough for that. But then when it comes to the rest of us reading the transcript, they say, well, maybe the transcript's not accurate. So if maybe the transcript's not accurate, what the hell's the deal with all the questioning of her? After Trump said this, he said this, right? Well, wait a minute. You guys said maybe the transcript's not accurate. So how do we know that's what Trump said? So it's just more hypocrisy from them. Here's one of my favorite things. So Castro asked, and this was asked at the last of Taylor and Kent, right? The idea is if you make it seem like what Trump did, requesting aid into this investigation, is somehow unique, then that must prove that it's somehow illegitimate in some way, right? So in other words, if Trump's the first president ever that asked a country to investigate an American, then this must be legitimate. So Castro asked if Yovanovitch has ever heard of a president asked for an American to be investigated. And she says no. Well, one, that's a lie. I could tell you one right now. Barack Obama. Wasn't he contacting our allies, our Five Eyes allies, to see if they had evidence of Donald Trump or people connected to him committing crimes? So maybe she just missed that news cycle for 3 years, right? But that happened. But secondly, let's assume that this was a unique situation, which it kind of is. Okay, I'll grant that. Now, why would it be unique? Why would it be unique for the President Trump to ask about this, right? To ask about a possible investigation into his political rival. Well, let's start with when something happens that's unprecedented. Like, did you see last night's Steeler game, which I'm a Steeler fan, right? And you had this Browns player, Myles Garrett, who ripped off the Steelers quarterback Mason Rudolph's helmet and literally smashed him in his unprotected head with his own helmet, right? Now, after that, some of the Steelers threw him on the ground and started kicking him. So imagine that this would be your take on this. Imagine if you said, did you see the Steelers kick that Brown? Boy, that's almost unprecedented. So that's really corrupt of that Steeler. It's like, well, wait, you're kind of leaving out the most important detail. That that was a response to a guy literally doing something unprecedented. Ripping off someone's helmet and beating them in the head with it. Could have killed him. Well, that's what we see happening here. The reason what Trump did looks so unprecedented is because it was a response to something that is literally unprecedented. I still have asked, name me one time that any executive authority in history from the United States has conditioned aid on the firing of a prosecutor. One time. As far as I know, it's never happened. But it's even worse than that. Not just any prosecutor, but a prosecutor who happens to be looking into the vice president's son's company. Has it ever happened before? I should think not. So if it's something being unprecedented is somehow proof that it's shady or it's guilty, then why the heck are they not asking about that? Here's some other things that are unprecedented. After a vice president uses $1 billion tax dollars to extort a foreign country to fire the prosecutor looking into his son's company, basically, there's no investigation in the United States about it. And the media basically doesn't have any interest and says it was totally legit. That's unprecedented as well. So yes, you know what else is unprecedented? All the treatment that Trump's got from the media and from the intel officials. Chuck Schumer, the leader for the opposition party, going on national television and saying, you can't criticize the intel officials or they're fined 6 ways from Sunday getting back at you. Leaking of Trump's personal calls with foreign leaders. All of that's unprecedented. The attacks Trump, 96% of media coverage against Trump, about Trump is against Trump. That's unprecedented. People that worked in his administration, and an unprecedented amount of them coming out and writing tell-all books and being against him. The leaders of the intel agencies from the outgoing administration, all getting jobs in the media, constantly smearing you, saying you're committing treason. That's unprecedented. So yes, in that environment, it might seem strange that Trump would ask the Ukrainian president, or that he would send Giuliani. But who can he trust? Now you might still say, well, that's no excuse. Fair enough, but don't pull my leg and leave out the part that what Biden did was unprecedented. Well, Biden's unprecedented action was totally legitimate because the EU and the IMF. All of those groups, by the way, the EU, all the leaders of the EU that are globalists, all supporters of George Soros and connected to him. The IMF, Christine Lagarde, the head of the IMF at the time, she actually attended George Soros' wedding. The Atlantic Council that you hear quoted all the time, paid for by the Open Society Foundation. That's George Soros. Those are the groups you hear quoted constantly. A bunch of Soros-Obama allies that are globalist leaders of the world, the Merkels of the world, right? The Jeremy Corbyns of the world or whatever. They all said, yeah, Shokin's got to go. Okay, I'm not impressed. That means crap to me. Sure, a bunch of Soros allies. Meanwhile, why wouldn't they say that? Because the prosecutors in Ukraine are trying to investigate the Anti-Corruption Action Center that was paid for by George Soros. Huh. So you mean Soros wanted, a bunch of Soros-connected people wanted prosecutors that was looking at his group fired? But yeah, good enough, right? What Biden did was unprecedented, and it justifies an unprecedented reaction to it. See if I have anything else. Almost done here. Representative Welsh, a Democrat, said, "It is always inappropriate to withhold congressionally approved aid for personal favors." That is, to the point, exactly what Joe Biden did, what he admitted to doing. But they say, well, it's okay. It's okay for Biden to do it. I mean, I'm not going to get into it again. But again, this all has to do with they assume Biden's a good guy, so he must have done it for good reasons. Almost wrapped up. I think that the Republicans should have let Ratcliffe and Jordan do the whole hearing. And the woman, too. Chef, I can't pronounce her name. She did pretty good, too. Or I should be elected or be their counsel, because I could do a better job than all of them. Representative Krish, I can't pronounce his name. I just can't. Krishna, so I only wrote down Krish. Plus, when you're tweeting, you have to shorten things. But he's a Democrat. You could look up. No disrespect to him because I can't pronounce his name or didn't write the whole thing. But I'll just call him Krish. He says aid was congressionally approved, important to the Ukraine, but suspending it harmed the U.S. Why didn't he talk about the congressional aid approved by the Obama administration that was threatened to be withheld by Obama and Biden? Was also jeopardizing and harming the Ukraine and the U.S. Again, I talked about this at the beginning. They talk about, oh, soldiers died, this and that. But that's exactly what happened under Obama. Obama never even sent javelins. Lastly, Krish says channels with Rudy were unusual and harmful. So my question to Krish would have been, is sending the vice president to tell a country they have 6 hours to fire a prosecutor who's looking at his son's company a regular channel? Why was that irregular channel legitimate? Stefanik, that's it. Yeah, I thought Stefanik did a good job. I really did. But none of them, right, everything they're doing up until towards the very end with Ratcliffe and Jordan, all of it's defensive. And that's the problem with the Republicans. Look, what did I say is the most important argument for the Republicans to make against this impeachment? If there was a reason to investigate Biden, then there is no case for impeachment. And so you say, here's exactly what happened with Biden. Here's what's going on. Now with Yovanovitch, they're saying it was shady for Trump to fire Yovanovitch. The best defense of that's to say, here's why she was fired. But they didn't do that. George Kent admitted what she was up to. She's pressuring all these crimes. They lied. She lied blatantly. She said, Lutsenko recanted. I never pressured him. Again, it probably wasn't perjury because she was very clever in the lie. She said, I never told them to drop an investigation. But sometimes we did tell them what would be in the best interest to end corruption. And that's what Kent's alluding to, right? Kent says, let me quote this again. We warned Lutsenko that opening up an investigation of Sitnik threatened to unravel a key component of our anti-corruption cooperation. That's not saying you have to drop this now. It's just saying, hey, we're really troubled by that investigation into Ukrainian election interference, and it'd be a shame. It's probably going to damage our cooperation with you. You know, things are going good. What'd Kent's letter say? Remember? The investigation into the Anti-Corruption Action Center, based on the assistance they have received from us, is misplaced. The United States is committed to supporting reforms within the Prosecutor General's office and building its capacity to meet citizens' demands, to recover stolen assets and counter corruption within the government. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped. They're upset with the Anti-Corruption Action Center. Then they say, as voiced by the European Union ambassador, we are gravely concerned about this investigation, which we see no basis, which appears to be an attempt to intimidate the Prosecutor General's office and anti-corruption activists. The United States is committing to supporting you. That's exactly what they're accusing Trump of, except in more harsh language. Hey, we're supporting you. We're giving you aid. We're really upset about this investigation. How'd Kent put it the next time he talked about it? This might unravel a key component of our anti-corruption cooperation, i.e. sending you money, sending you resources, if you investigate election interference. Yet Yovanovitch told us, it didn't happen. Lutsenko admitted. Lutsenko's corrupt. He later recanted. He said I never pressured him. He said there was no list. No, he didn't. As I showed. Right, that's a great question. Clearly clever. Yes. There were all sorts of accusations that Yovanovitch was having journalists like John Solomon, people like Rudy Giuliani, people like Dan Bongino, Joe DeGenova, yeah, that's how you say it, basically surveyed or getting information about them. How is that legitimate? Why wasn't that asked? And it's almost like the Republicans, just like with Blasey Ford, they were afraid to, they were attacking a harmless woman. And Sarah Carter, you're right. That's garbage. Your number one defense of Trump here is he had every right to fire you, which means you say, here's the corrupt things you've done. Now, why didn't they do this? Are they incompetent? I don't know. I hope not. Are they only half-assed trying to defend Trump? I hope not. Maybe. Maybe they're holding the cards. Maybe they have it. They have the goods on her, and they're just leaving her dig her own hole until they bring out the big guns. I don't know. But I know George Kent's testimony is awfully damning to her. And her conspiracy theory that, this was all to get, someone in there to actually investigate Biden. I'm going to link for all of y'all to read. This is John Solomon and the 15 questions he would have asked Yovanovitch. And I think they're worth reading. So I'm gonna link them there so you could read them. But I didn't go through them. Maybe I'll go through them later. But needless to say, hardly any of them were asked. Some of them versions were asked, but you have to be more aggressive. This is a problem with the Republicans. I work with the Republicans in the state level in Pennsylvania here. They don't know what they're doing. What are my representative? If you're in a Republican district, what's your representative doing right now against this impeachment coup? What are they doing? Who you got? Tucker, Hannity? Couple others. John Solomon's great. I'm trying my best. I'm trying to get this information out there. I feel like a schmuck. All last night, I'm basically retweeting my thread. Just over and over, I'm retweeting this thread. Again, it's on my pinned profile on Twitter. 27-point thread where I'm talking specifically about all of the stuff that I've been talking about in this video. George Kent's testimony, proving. I don't know if it links here or not if I put it. Let's see what happens. Yeah. It's got 30 interactions. People will put, here's all the payments Hunter Biden got. Here's this. But that's important, don't get me wrong. But it's so far less important because people will say, and this is true. Biden getting that money is not necessarily proof of him doing anything. It's proof of his dad's conflict of interest, but how's that proof that Hunter did anything wrong? I could be a bumbling drug addict who's sleeping with my dead brother's wife. It's still not illegal for some company to be like, hey man, we want to give you $50,000 a month or $83,000 a month and change. But if my dad's giving them aid because of my sweet position, fine. So when everyone's focusing on Hunter Biden and all these payments, I get it, and it is important. And it's like, what did he do to warrant this money? But at the end of the day, people could just default back on it looks bad, but whatever. It's not proof of a crime. But when you have State Department officials that are testifying against Trump, the star witnesses testifying against him, because they're saying it was inappropriate for him to interfere in the prosecutorial decisions of the Ukraine, when you have them admitting, oh, by the way, we interfered to stop investigations into foreign election interference, that's a bombshell. And I hardly ever use that word. That's a bombshell. When you have Ukrainian officials publicly admitting in the mainstream media in August of 2016, yes, we are interfering in the election to help Hillary Clinton. That's a bombshell. When you have, yes, Hunter getting these payments is bad. But what's worse is, and that's what everyone keeps saying, we need to investigate Hunter Biden. Sure, I'm for that. But the real investigation needs to be Joe Biden using $1 billion of your tax dollars to force the firing of the prosecutor looking into his son's company. That's the real investigation. And these things aren't difficult for the average person to understand. It's pretty simple to understand when you have a Ukrainian prosecutor saying, dude, the State Department kept telling me you have to drop investigations to people connected to Obama, including investigations into foreign election interference to help Hillary. And then the State Department says that's a lie. And then one of their members, George Kent, testifies, well, yeah, actually, that's not a lie. We were doing that. What is the case for impeachment right now? Every witness is going to be a State Department official, right? Every single one, with maybe one or two exceptions. So if their entire case is feelings of State Department officials, and it turns out that the State Department did exactly what they're complaining about Trump doing, except worse, interfering in prosecutorial decisions in the Ukraine to bury investigations into Obama allies, including foreign election interference. What is the case at that point? If you could prove that the star witness is trying to take Trump out because the idea of Trump investigating will show their corruption, if you could prove that Yovanovitch, there was a reason to fire her, then it doesn't matter that, oh, she's at Georgetown now and she seems like such a sweet lady and she's got a nice family and her record's really good. None of that matters. The company I'm at, I have a really good track record. I do. If I go into work tomorrow and I steal a bunch of money from my company, I can talk about my good track record all I want. Oh, they fired me and I have a good track record. And their response is going to be like, dude, you stole a bunch of money. Yeah, we agree. You were a good worker for 7 years, but you stole a bunch of money, so we fired you for that. What's the same here? Everything about her life story is irrelevant. Everything about her feelings, it was a big conspiracy to get me fired, is irrelevant if you could say, no, you were fired because of this. You buried an investigation into foreign election interference. That's it. You lied. You said, you talked to Lutsenko. You pressured him to drop investigations. You say that he recanted, that never happened. But George Kent, who you just got done telling us was a credible guy, he's your buddy, he admits that you guys did that. Or are you telling us, is your testimony, Yovanovitch, you had no part in this? That was George Kent and other State Department officials acting on their own? Well, can you see now why Trump might want this investigated? And can you see why you would be fired? Because all Trump knew was this is coming out of the State Department, and I'm hearing allegations that Yovanovitch is connected to it. And that's your fault for being so inept that you couldn't see what officials in your State Department were doing. But that'll be the new excuse. That I've already seen people starting to say that. Well, Kent saying that the State Department and he did that doesn't mean Yovanovitch did it. Okay, it proves Kent did it, which means his testimony should be incredibly wiped out. And Yovanovitch, who was the ambassador, if she didn't know that her officials were going behind her back, then she should have been fired anyways. And in retrospect, she'd say, oh, wow, they were doing that? Yeah, okay, I can see why Trump was pissed. Yep, that warrants an investigation. My bad. Seems like Trump did the legit thing. I'm out. Now, she knows. You think she doesn't know the testimony that Kent gave? Of course she knows. Oh, and here's another thing I find funny. This is like one of the last things I'll say. Isn't it funny how every time they ask these witnesses, or Obama was famous for this too, they'll be like, hey, it was publicly reported in Financial Times in 2016 that Lutsenko was basically bragging to interfering in the election, to releasing this black ledger, to saying that most Ukrainian politicians were on board for Hillary and they weren't going to stop interfering. Like, did you know about this? And what'd Taylor say? He's like, oh no, I didn't know until the testimony. And what's Yovanovitch say? She's like, well, I was aware, but I didn't really look into it. But then as soon as they're like, did you hear about this article where Trump said X? He said X about you, or Giuliani said, yeah. Oh, yes, I'm aware of that. Isn't that strange? All this publicly available information from 2006, 2017 about Ukrainians interfering. I knew about it. You knew about it. But the experts on Ukraine, the witnesses, they just didn't know about it. They didn't know. I didn't know. That was before my time. I didn't know. I don't watch the news unless it's just things that are bad about Trump. That's the only thing. Oh, it's that the news that affected me. The news that I smear Trump. Oh yeah, I'm aware of it. I'm aware of that news. I read Politico every day. I just happened to lose my copy of Politico the one day it was talking about, Ukrainian officials that I was dealing with every day interfering in the 2016. I lost my copy of Politico that day. It's, the craziest thing. So, yeah, that's what's going on today. This was completely worthless. Shame. It does nothing for the Democrats' case except, it's a buttress to further try to claim, any investigation into election interference or anything that happened in 2016 investigations of our side is corrupt and it must be avoided. And so when Durham comes out, you can already see when Durham and Horowitz come out with their reports, they're going to say, this is just a distraction and this was all part of Giuliani and Trump's scheme, their conspiracy theory. Now it's affected Barr and it's affected Horowitz and it's affected Durham. We shouldn't listen to anything that they say. It's all corrupt. It's all corrupt. That's half the reason, and the other half the reason was to put a face out there and go, here's this woman who's innocent and hardworking and's got a good, resume, and Trump devastated her, and he's a big meanie. He's just a big meanie. That's what this was about. If I was the Republicans, I would have been licking my chops to talk to her today. I'd want her on the stand. I'd want Lutsenko on the stand. I'd want Alexandra Chalupa on the stand. I'd want Shokin on the stand. Notice the Democrats won't have any of them, right? They'll just say Lutsenko's corrupt. Okay, let's bring him in. Let's talk to him. There was no interference. Okay, let's talk to Chalupa then. Nope. And, and then the last thing, so the Republicans, they did okay, but, they spend all this time talking about the whistleblower, and I get it. You said they read in, 20 articles? Where Schiff was like, yes, the whistleblower will testify. Yes, the whistleblower will testify. Yes, the whistleblower will testify. And I get it. And it has all been started by a corrupt whistleblower. Eric Ciaramella, who had connections to Brennan, who was there helping when Biden was extorting the Ukraine. Worked with all these people. Yes, that is corrupt. But the Democrats' argument, and it will be a compelling argument to people, it makes sense, is just going to be like this. Just like it was with the Russia investigation. Though it makes even more sense here. They're going to be like, look, dude, who cares if you think it started for corrupt reasons? The fact is, now we got all these facts, and we think the facts look bad for Trump. Now, I don't think the facts look bad for Trump. But they're going to be like, well, that's the argument then. The argument isn't how did it start? And they kind of have a point, to be honest. Just like I made the argument with Barr, right? Remember when you had the Mueller report and Barr released a summary of the Mueller report? And then all the Democrats went crazy. Barr's summary was illegitimate, blah, 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 blah. For months, can you believe that Barr did that? And I was like, dude, the Mueller report's out. Who cares what Barr's thoughts are on it? You keep saying Barr was wrong. Barr did this, Barr did that. We could all read it. Who cares if Barr's summary was wrong? You can read the damn report. Show me what you got. Well, it's the same here. They're just going to be like, dude, you keep complaining about the whistleblower, but we got 10 witnesses that say Trump did something bad. So if you're an American person and you're on the fence, and for whatever reason you're compelled by this testimony, you're going to be like, okay, yeah, I guess this whistleblower sounds shady, but why is that relevant now? The whistleblower was just a tool that got the ball rolling. Now I'm listening to this sweet testimony by Vindman and Hill and Taylor. Again, I don't think the testimony is good. But it has nothing to do with the whistleblower. An objective person, the people you should be trying to reach, they're just going to be like, yeah, whatever. So you could say, I get it, but you put so much energy into this whistleblower thing, and again, it's worth talking about. You should be making every defense. You should be talking about everything corrupt with this. But that pales in comparison to the stuff I've been talking about here. And they didn't get to these points. I mean, you might have an hour, 15 minutes total to ask questions of the witnesses. You got to get the meat out first, right? So, all right, I'm going to head out. It's almost 6 o'clock. I got to go take my comeuppance from my wife for leaving a dog chew up a pillow. So, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. If you don't see me again, I'm probably beaten to a pulp. So, I'm going to be putting out more videos. I'm trying to put up a live stream with a friend of mine to talk more about this. Please, 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 share that thread that I put up there. Please share it if you have Twitter. Share it with people. Please share the video that I put up. Again, I'll place this video up again. Please share this where it talks about how Kent... Why is this... Again, let me just briefly talk about this. Why is this so important? It's not just the details of what it says. One of the things the Democrats are experts of, and you see them do it over and over again. You see it with Shokin, you see it with Lutsenko, you see... They always want to attack the source. Oh, John Solomon, he's terrible. Oh, Shokin's corrupt. Oh, Lutsenko's corrupt. Oh, Sean Hannity's corrupt. Rush Limbaugh's corrupt. So they just ignore facts. Glenn Beck, which, by the way, Glenn Beck's been good in this. Glenn Beck's corrupt, right? That's one of their favorite tactics, to just say, corrupt, corrupt, corrupt. We don't trust the source. We don't trust the source. When you have their own witness admitting, when you connect the dots, to corruption, that's why it's so devastating. Yeah, that's my wife, Courtney, and I am in a lot of trouble. So, but please share that video and share that Twitter stream. And I'll probably be on Twitter tonight, typing stuff, and I might, do some more videos tonight, a live stream with someone else. But until then, thank you, everyone. Please, please share that if you can. Even if you don't want to share, I don't even care. I'm not look, I'm conceited, and I'd like to get credit for stuff, and I think I'm good at what I do. I think my specialty is not that I'm a super genius or anything like that. I think I'm a pretty good talker. I think that I'm passionate about it, which is 90% of the battle. That you actually have to care about the country. I think I'm a good talker. And I think that I also have a knack for explaining things to people that don't have the time to look into stuff as well as me. Even when I was a debate coach, that was my specialty, working with people that weren't experts in debate. I was able to take a difficult concept and be like, look, let me break it down as simple as possible. So I think I do that very well, which is, all reasons that I'd like to get, my material out there. But maybe you think that I'm saying something that's good, but you hate my voice or you don't want to give me hits. Dude, make your own video. Make your own Twitter feed about it. Just get the information out there. That's the most important thing. It really is. So please share that YouTube video. You can share this one if you want, but not many people are going to watch a 2.5 hour live stream. I get it. But share that Twitter feed. Get that information out there. I'd really appreciate it. So thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to go take my beating now, and have a good one.